Chapter 516. Currently, it was close to 6 a.m., so Gustav had to find his way to the main hall quickly. Once he moved out of the dragon residence, he spotted a silhouette in the distance. A 57-tall female cadet sporting a gem-like azure-colored hair, with pigtails on both sides of her head. A top-notch beauty and an extremely intense gaze that felt like it could pierce through steel. "Lever, what are you doing here?" Gustav voiced out as they walked towards each other. "You didn't think you'd just leave without saying goodbye, did you?" Lever voiced out before donning a calm smile. "I won't be gone for long anyways," Gustav responded as they arrived in front of each other. "Good. I'll be sure to take the first spot once again before you get back," Lever said while moving forward further, standing side by side with Gustav. "Don't keep me waiting for too long," Lever added before she resumed walking forward, passing Gustav completely. Smirk, "Sure I won't. Hopefully you won't be too weak for me by the time I get back," Gustav responded with a smirk, as he also resumed walking forward. Swasush. Gustav dashed forward a few moments later, headed in the direction of the main hall. In a few minutes he arrived there and moved in. He was cleared for exit from campgrounds in no time, and Gustav was told to move towards the third massive mirror in the middle of the massive hall. The middle mirror displayed the forest they had arrived in on their first day here. In contrast, the third one displayed a location that seemed to be in front of a massive body of water. Gustav did as he was instructed and moved towards the third mirror. FYI, his body completely phased through the mirror as he kept walking after arriving before it. Gustav found himself on the other side of the mirror and noticed he was standing in the middle of a massive platform situated in the middle of the ocean. On closer look, this wasn't a platform. Rather, it was a massive ship gliding through the oceanic waters. "Officer Crimson," someone called out to him from up ahead. It was another officer dressed in a different type of MBO uniform. "I'm Officer Crone, your pilot," he said while reaching out to shake Gustav. Gustav shook his hand back. "Follow me," he said while guiding Gustav across the massive ship. Multiple officers could be seen moving around, and with the size of the ship, Gustav couldn't see the end from his position without using God eyes. He followed the officer towards a particular part of the ship where different aircraft were parked. They moved towards a particular silver and blue-colored one amid the advanced-looking aircraft. Sheehan, the aircraft doors instantly glided open as they approached. "Please come in," he said politely while moving in with Gustav following behind. The aircraft was half the size of an old-age plane, but bigger than a jet. However, it looked super luxurious on the inside. Unlike the last time, when Gustav traveled with an MBO aircraft, he would be all alone in the cabin this time. He quickly moved in and strapped himself in as the pilot started the engine. Sohum, the aircraft lifted off into the air and zoomed off into the distance. It was from above that Gustav could see the outline of the massive ship. It didn't really look like a ship. It seemed more like an exalted platform similar to an island floating above the ocean's surface level. It was square-shaped and very large. The number of officers moving across it was in the hundreds. "I wonder what the purpose of this platform is." This was Gustav's final thought before it turned into a tiny and became out of sight in the next moment. While the aircraft was in motion, Gustav decided to bring out the information device and read about the city where they were headed. He had already done this before, but since there was nothing to do at the moment, he decided to preoccupy himself with that. The city was literally located on the other side of the world from their current position, according to what Gustav had noticed on the map displayed within the pilot's area. According to the map, the city had harsh, dry weather, and sometimes ash fell from the sky. It would have been worse, but in an age of technology, controlling the weather was an easy feat with the right equipment, which was why it was still possible for people to live there. Civil wars still happen? Gustav was still surprised that the city was undergoing a civil war because, based on what he knew of history, civil wars were a thing of the past. They mostly occurred in old time periods. He had never heard of one happening during his lifetime or in the past 500 years, although he still knew that several intense battles still occurred in places across the world due to terrorist organizations, syndicates, and all that. Based on the reports, Lineage City plunged into a civil war due to several powerful groups coming into a disagreement on how much influence the world government was supposed to have on the city. Lineage City, just like many other cities, signed treaties with the world government. Still, they had continued to remain traditional in the sharing of power within the several powerful groups that were in existence since the beginning, only giving the world government a small portion of authority. This portion of power slowly expanded, and some of those groups noticed their authority and influence in the city reduced over the years. The affected ones wanted to retain their control of the city and voiced out their disagreement with the world government's power expansion, while the others who seemed unaffected didn't care and chose to side with the world government. The tension continued to escalate as these groups started to show hostile behaviors until the whole situation blew up to this extent. The city citizens also got involved due to the degrading situation of the city's economic state, causing a full-blown civil war of people choosing sides. Chapter 517. The city citizens also got involved due to the degrading situation of the city's economic state, becoming a full-blown civil war of people choosing sides. Gustav had all the information he needed on the groups in power, so he had already planned his first steps out as they journeyed across the skies. He could tell that things would be really chaotic, but he prepared his mind for whatever was to come. About an hour later, Skririv, the loud, whistling sound suddenly reverberated across the place as alarms started blaring within the aircraft. The pilot's eyes widened as he quickly steered the aircraft out of the way. Foo! A blue beam shot across the sky, passing by the side of the aircraft. It was only inches away from grazing the aircraft, and even though there was no contact, the force from the beam rattled the plane vigorously. Gustav was already alerted at this point as he turned to face the pilot's corner. "What's happening?" he voiced out with a confused expression. "We're under attack." The pilot voiced out loudly from ahead. Gustav had already thought of this, but he was quite shocked that this would be happening. "From who?" Gustav asked as he prepared to unstrap himself. Unidentified Azalon jet in pursuit, the voice of an AI resounded within the aircraft as a projection of a massive black, rhombus-shaped jet appeared in front of Gustav. "What the hell is that?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of disbelief after seeing just how the jet had different weaponry strapped to it. The pilot moved the aircraft forward at full speed and dodged to the side to avoid another incoming projectile. This time, a purplish ray blasted past them, causing the aircraft to vibrate intensely once again. Gustav lost his balance while trying to stand and nearly got blasted towards the back of the plane. It's an Azalon jet, one of the top 10 most powerful flying weapons in the world. It doesn't need to be piloted by anyone. It only needs to be locked on to its target and it will annihilate them, the pilot explained while still flying across the sky and dodging the multiple projectiles. "Just stay in your seat. I've got this," the pilot voiced out after noticing Gustav trying to stand once again. Gustav stared at the pilot from behind with a contemplative expression before leaning back and strapping himself to the seat once again. The pilot's eyes squinted as he moved his right hand away from the control wheel, piloting with just his left hand, tapping on some keys within the cockpit. From outside, within the clouds high up, these two aircraft could be seen bolting across the sky at immense speed. One was twice the size of the other, and it happened to be the Azalon jet. Twi, it would occasionally shoot out attacks of different kinds, missiles, and bolts of energy. Still, the pilot of the MBO aircraft seemed to be very skilled. He dodged every single projectile skillfully as 3 massive cannon-like weapons protruded from the sides of the aircraft. However, no attack was shot out yet. The aircraft kept gliding through the air and dodging the projectiles from behind. All of a sudden, the MBO aircraft accelerated into the sky and disappeared into a cloud. The aircraft behind shot through the massive cotton of cloud and arrived on the other side. However, he was unable to see the aircraft. It quickly decelerated and started sweeping from place to place across the sky, looking for the MBO aircraft. This continued for about 30 seconds before the MBO aircraft suddenly appeared on its rear. Boom. It shot out a powerful penetrative red beam that slammed into the left bottom corner of the jet. As the jet tilted to the side after taking the damage, the MBO aircraft swerved towards the back. They shot out another beam towards a particular corner of the jet. Boom. A loud explosion blasted across the sky as this second attack destroyed half of the jet. It started diving downwards, falling through the clouds. You really think having a nearly impenetrable covering makes you the intimidating? Hee. The pilot laughed lightly within the aircraft as he moved forward with speed, ignoring the crashing jet behind. He's good. Gustav had to admit that this was one good pilot. At the start of the attack, the whole situation seemed dangerous with the pilot's expression, which was why Gustav was ready to spring into action, thinking he wouldn't be able to handle it. It seemed the pilot was only surprised at the fact that they were getting attacked. Gustav had witnessed the whole exchange between both aircraft through both the holographic projection in front of him and his perception that could sense outside of the aircraft. Based on what the pilot had said, it would seem the jet was almost impenetrable. Still, he seemed to have targeted the weak spots, which he wouldn't have been able to lock onto if he didn't keep running at first and pull the disappearing trick he did earlier. What none of them noticed was a red object that dislodged from the crashing jet, flying in the direction where their aircraft was headed. This red object turned invisible as it bolted through the skies in the same direction the aircraft disappeared into, reporting an air attack at coordinates. Gustav sat back with a contemplative expression as he listened to the pilot report the incident that had just happened while still gliding through the sky. It was a wonder why anyone would try shooting them down. There weren't a lot of organizations that had the balls to attack an MBO aircraft, and even those that did wouldn't try it so as not to incur the wrath of the MBO. This led Gustav to think of two possible theories. Either these people were stupid or confident enough not to leave any tracks behind. Currently, a troop of MBO officers was heading towards the crash spot to investigate where the jet was sent out from. Chapter 5:18. It was already a given that this wasn't a common occurrence with the pilot's reaction, which led Gustav to one final realization. This attack was directed towards me. Young Joe, maybe? This was the only person Gustav could think of at the moment. It was unlikely that anyone else would try this, because even though he amassed quite the fame during the MBO test phases, he hadn't built enough prestige for any enemy force to truly consider him a threat. This was his thought process, and he could only think of young Joe being the culprit. About 3 hours later, Gustav could see the aircraft descending a little bit as they arrived at the end of a side of the Pacific Ocean. They glided past it, arriving above a massive city. This city had different kinds of small 2- to 3-story buildings lined up in rows and columns. They were so loosely joined that one would think there were no spaces in between. However, it looked very beautiful and quite civilized due to the well-constructed passageways in different areas and a floating train rail connected to different city points. We have arrived in Ruhagi City, a neighboring city to Lineage City, the pilot voiced out as the aircraft began to slow down. They kept moving for about a few hundred miles before they arrived above a small forestry area. Within this forestry area, a visible cleared-out space could be seen up front. It was the size of 3 football fields combined, and camp houses could be seen. The aircraft descended at a clear spot by the right side amidst the stares of a group of officers who seemed to have been expecting their arrival. The door slid open, and Gustav walked out of the aircraft with the pilot. The group of officers in the vicinity were already walking towards them. Officer Crimson, welcome. The leading officer, who happened to be a tanned man with a buzz cut and buff stature, was the first to arrive in front of Gustav and offer a handshake. Gustav responded by receiving the hand and returning the handshake. Still, After a few seconds passed, the officer didn't let go of his hand. "I heard you're quite powerful among the cadets," he said as he tightened his grip around Gustav's hand. "I have been deployed here as an officer and not a cadet," Gustav responded while retaining his grip on the man's hand without changing expression. "Oh, but just how strong are you?" the officer questioned with a sharp gaze while a grin appeared on his face. "Strong enough to get a 3-star mission as a debut," Gustav responded. At the same time, his grip also turned tighter without showing any form of expression. The officers in the background stared at the two without saying a word as the atmosphere turned tenser and tenser. All of a sudden, "Ha! I'm just messing with you, kid. Welcome," the tanned, buzz-cut officer voiced out with a playful tone as he let go of Gustav and patted his shoulder. Gustav's expression was still the same. "I'm Officer Gooseman, the one supervising this mission. I will be in touch with you while you're carrying out your mission to share information and instructions on different occasions when needed," he explained while turning around to walk with Gustav. "This is Officer Louis Integro, Officer Millie Brown, and Officer Tron Bosco," he introduced the other 3 officers behind, who were lined up just as he had called them sequentially. A massive 7-foot-tall man with long red hair, a stunning mixed Latino-looking lady with an hourglass figure and tied-up black hair, and lastly, a fat 6-foot-tall bald man with a stomach similar to the size of 7 balls joined together. They all greeted Gustav, and he returned the greeting as well. "We will be providing you with assistance as well," Officer Millie Brown voiced out. "I'm in charge of the equipment you will need for the break-in operation into Lineage City," she added. "Both of us will deal with helping you get in undetected," Officer Louis Integro voiced out with a deep tone, next while hinting at the other officer, Tron Bosco, who nodded in response. Gustav noted that and followed them as they headed towards the massive tent placed in the middle of the place. The instant they walked in, Gustav felt as if he had arrived in a different place entirely. The internal structure of the tent was just so well designed. It looked like a standard base of operation. Several holographic monitors were stationed at different points displaying the ongoing civil war within Lineage City. It showed several places within the city that had nearly been completely decimated, and some where battles were ongoing presently. As you can see, Lineage City is still in a state of disarray. Since the MBO haven't been given the go-ahead to infiltrate, we have no way of sending in a team to catch Sahil, Officer Gooseman said while staring at the holographic monitor that displayed a picture of Sahil, as well as his information. Gustav looked around, staring at the different projections that displayed what was currently happening. There was one where he could see the view of the city from up above. "Is that a dome?" Gustav asked after noticing the barely visible outline of a circular barrier covering the city. "Precisely. This is what stops anyone beyond a certain power level from going in undetected. This is why we need you. You happen to be the weakest here, but not just that. According to the reports, you're more suitable for the job due to your distinction within camp," Officer Gooseman stated bluntly. Gustav's expression remained unchanged, even though it sounded like an insult. "They are right. I have picked in on information regarding the dome. It detects mixed bloods from power level Echo rank and above. Those are considered to be threats since they would be able to break in due to their strength." Chapter 519. Any mixed blood below that level will not be able to break through the barrier with their strength. You're still peak level marshal rank, so you qualify. Everyone in this room besides you is Echo rank and above. The system explained in Gustav's mind. "Oh, I see," Gustav noted. "If we have to wait for the permission of the world government to go in and calm the situation down, Sahil would be able to escape." Officer Gooseman stated, "I only have to find him and place a tracker on him." "Seems like a simple job," Gustav stated. "Don't underestimate the opponent, especially since this is your first mission," Officer Millie Brown stated from the side. "Getting in is guaranteed with our input. Getting out also won't be too much of an issue since the barrier is created to prevent entry not leaving, but finding Sahil himself will be the most difficult aspect," Officer Guzman added. Remember, it's a war, kid. You can find yourself in a battle at any point in time. Officer Luis Integro voiced out from the side as well. There will be combatants on your level of power there as well. So don't get too cocky. This isn't the MO camp. This is the real deal, Officer Tron Bosco voiced out. Every time he spoke, his belly shook due to its massive size. I can see that. Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. TSK, TSK. These kids are always so confident until they find themselves in dangerous situations and shit their pants, Officer Millie Brown added. I don't think that will happen with this kid. Anyways, moving on, Officer Guzman continued speaking. He explained and pointed out different parts of the city where it was suspected that Sahel would be located. Some of them happened to be the most dangerous spots in the city, where occasional battles usually broke out. A state of emergency had long been issued within the city, so being in a household doesn't make you safe. You won't be able to sleep properly at night, since danger lurks at every corner. Officer Guzman kept speaking, and then gave Gustav some ideas to keep himself safe while on the endeavor. At this point, over 2,000 deaths have been reported, but the world government are not allowed to unless it reaches up to 10,000, and we can't wait that long. Also, we can't expect bodies to keep piling up for the sake of wanting to catch one person. The civil war may even end before the death toll reaches that high, and all these would still lead to Sahel's escape, so this mission is very crucial, Officer Guzman advised. Gustav nodded slightly in response as he noted these locations, putting them at the back of his mind. When do I leave? Gustav asked. Tomorrow morning by 6 a.m. Officers Lewis and Tron will be accompanying you to the break-in point, Officer Guzman responded. In the meantime, Officer Millie will walk you through the features of every gadget you will be receiving, he added while gesturing at Officer Millie. Officer Millie gestured for Gustav to follow her out of the main tent, which he did. As they walked out, Gustav wondered why Miss Amy wasn't here when Gradier Zenatus had stated that this case was linked to one she was working on. He decided to put it at the back of his mind for now as he walked into the equipment tent with Officer Millie. This tent was smaller compared to the previous one. Still, upon entering, Gustav could see rows and rows of different kinds of gadgets and weaponry stacked on them. Officer Millie moved to one of the first and picked a button-sized white device. This is AF-21. It can grant you invisibility for 10 seconds. However, you can only use it a total of 4 times before it runs out of energy. Being in Lineage City means you won't be able to recharge it, so use it wisely, she explained. Gustav received it from her and placed it in his storage device. She walked over to a rack where some silver-colored, circular-shaped objects were lined up and picked up 17 of them. A small detonator capable of decimating a bungalow-sized building, she said while handing them over to Gustav. Each one was the size of a pinky fingernail. They were so small, anyone would think they were harmless. She moved on and handed Gustav some advanced smoke grenades, as well as some other gadgetry that might be needed. She finally arrived in front of a weaponry rack. Here, several types of weapons could be seen, ranging from those that help with melee combat and long-distance combat. Gustav could see guns shaped in different ways, glowing with infused energy stones. Also blades and daggers looking so sharp that they could be felt without making contact. What kind of weapon are you skilled in welding? She asked Gustav. Gustav recalled training within the MBO with some weapons during combat class. Even though he seemed proficient in all, he wasn't really a gun person, so he looked around the rack. What does that one do? Gustav voiced out while pointing at a red-hilted katana placed by the ledge. Oh, that one is too powerful for you to handle. Chose another one, she said with a dismissive expression. How do you mean? Gustav asked. It has the power to cleave steel or any tougher solid metal with ease based on the wielder, she explained. Its powers is revealed with a swing, but you will not be able to swing it, she added. Gustav moved over and reached out to grab it. No, she reached out to stop him, but it was too late. He's XXXXX. A charge of electric current ran through Gustav's hand the moment he made contact with it, causing him to be tossed backward by a few feet. Bam! Gustav slammed into some of the racks behind. Ow! He voiced out bluntly before picking himself back up with an unbothered expression and checking his hand. Scorch marks had appeared on his skin, but right before his very eyes. The scorch marks began to disappear as he healed. It easily broke through my defense? Gustav was astonished. Chapter 5:20. It easily broke through my defense? Gustav was astonished as he stood in place and stared at his hand. Are you all right? Officer Millie voiced out with concern as she arrived in front of him. Yeah, I'm good, Gustav responded while waving his right hand to get rid of the numbness. I wanted to tell you that using it also damages the wielder. The more destructive you want it to be, the more damage it inflicts, she stated. Oh, all right, Gustav stated as he began walking towards the front again. He suddenly stretched out his hand towards the hilt of the sword again before Officer Millie could react. What are you doing? Before she could complete her sentence, Gustav had already grabbed hold of the hilt. The electric arcs appeared again, electrocuting Gustav's hand, but he was already prepared for it like the last time. He hardened his body as he forcefully picked the katana up and unsheathed it even while the electrocution was still happening. The entire blade was up to 4 feet long and reddish in color, with blue arcs of electricity swimming across it with intensity. Swish! Dashing out of the tent, Gustav arrived outside instantly and swung the katana forward with force. Squeeze-wheeze, the 27 feet long reddish arc covered in lightning bolts traveled forward from the katana towards the forest in front. Loud vibrations rocked the place as about 70 trees in front were instantly cleaved in half and set on fire as the arc traveled forward nonstop. Four! A blazing fire rose up, causing Gustav's eyes to slightly widen. Oh, who knew it was this effective? He voiced out with a wry smile before sheathing the katana back and placing it in his storage ring. The instant it disappeared into his storage ring, Gustav's arm trembled a bit from the intense electrocution his arm went through while trying to swing the katana. "I'll take this one," Gustav said to Officer Millie, who had just walked out of the tent and witnessed what just happened. Her eyes, along with her mouth, were still wide open. How is a marshal-ranked cadet able to swing the Jiko Hakai katana, with barely any damage for that matter? From the first touch, he should have passed out. She couldn't wrap her head around what she had just witnessed. The other officers had also come out at this point to see half the forest in front of them nearly burnt to the ground. What happened? Are we under attack? This was their first question. Officer Millie quickly explained to them what had just gone down. They also stared at Gustav with looks of surprise, not wanting to believe he actually managed to swing the sword without being turned into a shish kebab. Gustav was actually harmed, but his body had the regenerative function, which was why he wasn't bothered about causing self-sabotage to himself. He's got to have one hell of a pain resistance, or his body is so tough that such high voltage of electricity barely damages him. Like Utron, Officer Gooseman voiced out while staring in Gustav's direction. Officer Tron's stomach shook as he nodded. It is very impressive for a cadet to be able to wield it and even swing the Jiko Hakai katana without getting roasted to a crisp. Even some full-fledged officers would have passed out after one swing, since not everyone has a great body defense, he praised. Why are we just watching the forest burn? Lewis, do something about this, Officer Gooseman instructed. Officer Lewis Integro nodded and walked forward with his massive body. He arrived a few feet in front of the burning forest and stretched both hands sideways. Pa! Four! The instant he clapped both hands together, a blast of icy energy burst forth. The environment was instantly developed with cold, as ice instant covered the entire burning forest in a matter of seconds, forming icicles in spots where the fire was initially seen. He withdrew his hand after a few seconds, and it could be seen that the forest had literally turned into the North Pole. Snow covered the trees along with fog spreading to every part of the forest. Kid, maybe next time don't destroy nature. We only have a little of that left, Officer Gooseman said to Gustav. My bad. I didn't expect it to be this effective, Gustav explained. Good thing I didn't use my full strength, he sighed internally in relief. The power of the Jiko Hakai katana is extremely high, but trying to use its full power will only end up destroying the wielder. The system voiced out in Gustav's head. I see. If I tried wielding it at full strength, what would happen? Gustav asked internally. Your arm will be blasted off. If you tried using it with transformation while activating some of your bloodlines to give power boost, half of your body will be blasted apart, and you might not survive based on your current regeneration level. The system explained with a solemn tone. Oh, that's pretty dangerous. Gustav was intrigued to see how much destruction could be created at his fully powered swing. Still, now that the system had told him this, he had to reconsider using it beyond a certain level. Gustav was later shown to the tent where he'd be spending the night. Currently, it was still afternoon, so he had time to finish his daily tasks and channel his bloodline before night fell. About 2 hours later, Gustav was done with his daily tasks and returned to his room to channel his bloodline. Just now, one of his tasks involved going around Ruhagi City, which he just did. He was actually jumping from rooftops to rooftops across the city, which initially got people alarmed because they thought he was a burglar. However, when they noticed him dressed in MBO uniform, they turned respectful. Most of them were very surprised to see someone looking so young, an officer in the MBO. The instant Gustav sat on the bed provided him in his tent, he rolled his left sleeves up and tapped a particular part of his wrist. Zing. Chapter 5:21. Zing, a small silver-colored bracelet appeared on his wrist, glowing blue light on its surface. 4 green bars appeared on them, which indicated their battery life. This was the Grade 7 spatial bracelet Gustav had gotten from the base weapons vault back then. Time to pick another checkpoint, Gustav said as he tapped on the screen surface of the bracelet. A few seconds later, a small, web-like, bluish glow appeared in front of Gustav. It disappeared in the next instant, and Gustav smiled. 2 more slots left. Gustav muttered as the bracelet turned invisible. Originally, the Grade 7 spatial bracelet had 4 slots, so there could only be 4 checkpoints where Gustav could teleport to at will, so long as the bracelet was charged. This was the second checkpoint he was setting. The first was back in camp, and his plan was to set the 3rd checkpoint in Lialuk City. He had no idea if the barrier covering Lialuk was going to interfere with the power of the spatial bracelet or not. However, if it did work, this would make it easier for him to leave and return at any time he willed. He still remembered Great Commander Cheyenne mentioning that a Grade 7 spatial bracelet was so rare that only 2 were available within the base weapons vault, and he happened to have taken one. He hoped that with this, there wouldn't be any issues because it would come in handy if he could escape from any unforeseen situations. The next morning arrived in a flash as Gustav found himself awake at 5 a.m. He was already used to this. This might also be his last night enjoying a peaceful sleep before embarking on the mission. He might not even have any sleep at all for the next few nights. Gustav stayed in his room channeling his bloodline for about 30 minutes before he was called out. By 5:30, there was another short briefing within the main tent with the officers. They handed Gustav a 2-way communication device, but advised him not to use it too frequently due to the city's government tracking any form of communication coming through or going out of the barrier. They also couldn't contact him frequently due to this. There were so many risks involved. After the briefing, Gustav and the 2 officers, Tron Bosco and Louis Inegro, had land vehicles parked by the side they used for transport. Gustav followed them in the vehicle, and they drove off out of the forest. About 30 minutes later, they had arrived at a small mountain pass where they had to drive by the side of the mountain. After arriving at the end of the pass, they parked the vehicle. Officer Lewis explained that they were close to the outskirts of the western part of the city. They had to walk because using a vehicle would attract the attention of military forces parading around the barrier from time to time. They treaded softly at this point, and several thousand meters ahead, Gustav could already see the outline of a part of Lialuk City. This part looked like it had already been burnt to the grounds, and the barely visible dome was centered around a few feet in front, which would most likely prevent entry. They hid behind a huge piece of rock while observing the surroundings. Officer Tron brought out 2 rectangular-shaped red devices and threw them out. He threw one towards the far west and the other towards the east. Try. Both devices landed a few feet away from the dome and flashed a bright red light before disappearing. Let's move, Officer Lewis voiced out. They moved away from the covering of the rock towards the dome up ahead. The instant they arrived before the dome, Officer Tron brought out a large 7-foot-tall equipment from his spatial storage device. Stand right in front of the dome and place one of your hands an inch away from it, they instructed. Gustav complied and stretched his right hand forward, stopping just 1 inch away. Even without making contact, he could feel the energy from the dome. I could absorb all this in my energy containers, but it would ruin the mission, Gustav said internally, knowing that the people in authority within the city would instantly be alerted if he tried that. Officer Tron moved the 7-foot device close to Gustav's back and asked him to remain still. Officer Tron turned to the side and nodded to Officer Lewis. Now, Officer Lewis stood behind Officer Tron and placed both his hands on his shoulders. In contrast, Officer Tron placed both his hands on the device behind Gustav. Suddenly, Gustav felt a massive amount of energy gathering behind him. Officer Lewis' hands on Tron's shoulder displayed an icy glow, while Officer Tron's hands exuded a red glow as he retained contact with the device. The device began to charge up, shining a milky-colored light. Gustav saw his body turning a bit transparent, and he felt a little woozy. "Go in now," Officer Tron shouted from behind while groaning like he was in pain. Even though Gustav felt woozy, the instructions sounded clear in his head. He proceeded to move forward, and his body phased right through the barrier, and he arrived on the other side. The instant he got through, his body returned back to normal, and he stared at both officers through the layer of barrier in between them. They looked a bit worn out, but he also noticed their looks of caution, like something had happened. This signaled to Gustav to keep moving as they quickly packed up the equipment hurriedly and turned around. Gustav did as he was told and dashed straight through the decimated street. Meanwhile, some military troops behind the dome seemed to have arrived on the scene, since they sensed a weird flux of energy. But to their surprise, they didn't find anyone there. What they didn't notice was 2 barely visible outlines hiding behind a piece of rock in the distance. They couldn't see them because both officers had made use of the gadget that turned a person invisible for 10 seconds. This allowed them to get out of the range of detection. Chapter 5:22. What they didn't notice was 2 barely visible outlines hiding behind a piece of rock in the distance. They couldn't see them because both officers had made use of the gadget that turned a person invisible for 10 seconds. This allowed them to get out of the range of detection. The 2 devices Officer Tron threw out the detection devices that alerted them of the incoming troops the instant Gustav phased in. The troops later left, allowing both officers to scurry back towards the location where the land vehicle was parked. At this point, Gustav was still within the decimated part of the city. He arrived at a few minutes back. His clothes had long been changed into a ragged one before their arrival here, so he would fit in. Gustav crouched as he arrived at a part of the city where broken pieces of buildings piled upon one another. He reached out and touched the sand before rubbing it on his face to make himself look even messier. SRRHHHYYKK. His face slowly morphed, making him look a bit older with an oblong-shaped face and a small mustache. He looked totally different from his original look. Gustav moved forward slowly towards a part of the city that still looked to fairly be in shape. Behind, he had already passed by so many destroyed buildings and a litter of corpses. Most corpses had incomplete body parts, which depicted that they all died gruesome deaths. Crunch, Gustav exclaimed with a low tone as he felt he stepped on something. Upon looking down at his left foot, he noticed it was a piece of a cut-off arm. Not just any arm, but from the size, it looked to be the arm of a kid. Gustav squatted again and sighed. War knows no age. Size a person? It truly destroys all, he muttered while preparing to stand up when he noticed something. Clutched in the grasp of the closed hand was a small round device. Gustav grabbed hold of the arm and forcefully pried open the hand before grabbing hold of the ball. God Eyes has been activated. What's a kid doing with a bomb? Gustav questioned with a contemplative expression. He could see the same properties within this device was similar to how the internal structure of a bomb looked. Kita are not permitted to participate in wars. Which psycho would send a kid on this suicide mission? Gustav muttered internally as he stood to his feet. He was initially okay with the whole situation, understanding that the kid might have been caught in the crossfire. But now that he had seen this, he was positive that the kid must have been among the combat forces battling here. The bomb wasn't detonated, which meant the kid had weapons in their possession. Gustav stood up and kept the bomb in his storage device before moving forward. He already knew what he was getting into by coming here, but it was still disappointing nevertheless. The fact that the world government couldn't interfere and end this made things even worse. Gustav had decided he was going to get to the bottom of everything before leaving this place. He walked within a street that was fairly in good condition, but he still hadn't found a single living person. The buildings that looked okay had their doors shut and windows completely covered. Using his perception, Gustav found out that there were people who were alive in this vicinity. Still, it seemed they locked themselves indoors in fear of the brutality going on outside. Gustav only felt they were lucky enough that the battles here didn't blast their buildings away. However, Gustav could tell that soon enough, some of them would have to come out to source for food because whatever they had stored would eventually finish. Gustav kept moving from place to place for up to an hour, and all that time spent was only used for marking how the places looked while searching for a place to shelter himself for nighttime. During the time he spent walking, he had only seen a few people come out of their homes. They all looked tattered and dirty as well. So Gustav fit in. This particular region was one of the locations where it was mentioned that Sahil might be hiding, but so far, Gustav hadn't even noticed anything out of the ordinary. About an hour more later, Gustav had scoured this whole region on foot. He visited what was left of the bus stations, the nearly run-down upwards where trains used to travel over the city, with floating railways. So many spots, but nothing seems to be happening in this region as of now. Just as Gustav was about to go round again, the sounds of fast footsteps suddenly reverberated across the environment from up front. Gustav noticed that several people who were on this part of the streets started running. A middle-aged man tapped Gustav as he ran. "The Zalabans are coming," he voiced out and kept running. He felt Gustav had no clue of the situation, which was why he alarmed him. Gustav looked around the vicinity. He had already found somewhere he could hide out around here, but the wall by the side had been blasted open. Gustav turned to face the building on his right and leaped towards the second floor. He landed in front of an empty apartment that had its back wall blasted open. Gustav walked in through the door space, which was wider than it was supposed to be, and quickly moved towards the left area of the wall. He bloated slightly as his body transformed into a greenish fur appeared on his body, and another head began to grow on his back. Activated partial collapsal transformation. Gustav placed his hand on the wall, and smooth-looking icicle-like walls protruded out of his hands and onto the edge. These icicle-like walls joined the wall on the left to the wall on the right, closing up the space of the broken wall behind. Chapter 5:23. Gustav didn't stop. He kept it up till the holes in the roof were covered alongside part of the entrance, leaving only a little space. Looking at how he had constructed the house and turned it back to being a proper shelter, Gustav had a gratified look on his face. He moved towards the entrance area and stared at the street from the small hole he left. Others that were out earlier had also moved back into their abodes. A few moments later, a troop dressed in all black vests and helmets came walking by the street. They were about 20 in number, armed with advanced weaponry, from what Gustav could see. The Zalabins. Gustav noted how they looked, and also saw a crescent moon emblem on the left side of their vests with a small eyeball positioned above it. This was one of the 6 most powerful groups in the city against those who initiated the Civil War. Gustav had read about them, and according to the reports, they were brutal to anyone who opposed them, including the citizens. The citizens usually hid in their homes upon seeing this group because they would not hesitate to cut down anyone, and they were highly unpredictable. According to them, they were preserving the peace by dealing with anyone who was found outside their homes. Some of the citizens were on the side of those who were fighting to reclaim power from the world government, and some were on the sides of this group, while others didn't care about all that. They just wanted their old lives back. This particular group didn't care about all that. They messed with anyone regardless of what side they chose. These idiots came out of their houses again. I can see the footprints on the dirt. They have to be on the side of the enemy for them to do such, the ones at the front voiced out as they looked around, tracing the footsteps. Blaster. That house, one of them shouted out and pointed towards the house opposite Gustav's current hideout. The person with a gigantic frame in their midst moved towards the front of the house with a massive cannon-like device in his grasp. His footsteps made loud noises as he took steps which depicted that this might be heavy. A blue beam started charging up around the muzzle area of the weapon. Boom! It was shot towards the bungalow-sized house in front, and what was heard next were screams. Kyre! The massive hole had appeared on one side of the wall, and cracks started spreading across the rest before the walls crumbled down entirely. A family of 5 could be seen within the household, crooked up together, with visible signs of fear on their faces. 2 parents, a teenage girl, and 2 young boys. Some of the troops moved forward and surrounded them while pointing their weapons towards them. The person who seemed to be like the leader among the group moved forward and reached out his hand to grab hold of the father's head. Kyre! No. Father! The children and the wife screamed out as the man was dragged away. Did you forget you were supposed to stay indoors? Disobeying means you're going against the government, and going against the government means punishment from us, the group leader voiced out with a raspy tone. Please, I needed to feed my family. We have nothing left. How are we going to survive without food? The man pleaded with a fearful and apologetic look. You were provided with palliatives. Don't act like you got nothing, the group leader voiced out before throwing the back of his hand towards the man's face. Pah! The smack sent him flying backward with blood jetting out of his mouth. 2 people from the troops reached out and picked him up before bringing him to the front of the leader again. Please, the palliatives were barely enough to feed my children and wife. The man still kept pleading while gesturing at his family. Oh, you mean them? The group leader voiced out with a condescending tone while turning to look at the rest of the family. A smirk appeared on his face as he walked forward. Why don't I help you with that then? He said after arriving in front of the other family members. The father, who was still kneeling in front, turned around as he heard that. What do you mean? He questioned while blood kept dripping from his mouth. I will help you reduce the number of your family members. So the palliatives will be enough, just as the group leader voiced that out. A weirdly shaped blade appeared in his hand, which he swung forward. The wife's head was smoothly cleaved off. Plop! It fell to the ground along with her body, while blood gushed out like a fountain from her headless neck. Kyre! Mum! No! All 4 of them shouted out in fright as a fountain of tears streamed down their faces. The father's eyes widened as he stared at his wife's headless body. He couldn't believe his eyes. He saw his life flash before his eyes as he stood to his feet and ran towards the leader in a bid to attack him. "I'll kill you," he shouted out in a fit of rage as he brought out a sharp object from his pocket. The leader easily swerved to the side and thrust out his left leg towards the father's side. Bang! A loud bone-cracking sound reverberated across the place as the man was sent flying to the side and kept rolling as he vomited blood. The troops reached out to hold him down and brought him towards the group leader on his knees. "I have helped you reduce the size of your family to make feeding easier. You should be thanking me, not trying to stab me," he voiced out into the ears of the weeping man who had just been widowed. Gustav, who was watching this from within his hideout, had a dark expression on his face after witnessing what had just gone down. Remember, you can't interfere with the war. The system could sense the rage building up within him, so it quickly reminded him. Chapter 5:24. Remember, you can't interfere with the war. The system could sense the rage building up within him, so it quickly reminded. Gustav recalled the conversation at the tent base of operations where the officers had advised him several times not to interfere with battles happening between citizens or situations like this unless he was directly involved. According to them, he staying hidden most times was the best, so he wouldn't attract attention to himself. His power level was among the highest that could be found within the city, so it would pretty much get suspicious if he kept revealing himself, which was why they advised him to only battle in situations where he couldn't escape from. "I know. I wasn't going to interfere anyways," Gustav answered without showing any expression whatsoever. The system remained silent after hearing that, and they kept watching what was going on. The leader of the group started walking in circles around the man. "Or, you think this still isn't enough generosity?" he voiced out with a condescending tone. "All right then, let me help you more," he added with a weird tone before moving towards the frightened kids. He reached out and grabbed the head of the teenage girl. "No, what are you doing? Don't touch my daughter. Don't harm her." The father kept shouting out as he saw this, but two people from the troops kept holding him down. "Harm her? No, definitely not. I won't do that," the leader voiced out, causing the man to calm down. "Faskia, what do you think about her?" the leader voiced out while running his hand along the girl's face and turning her from side to side. The girl had a lightly tanned face with beautiful brown eyes and curly blonde hair, and she looked no older than 16, but her face was smeared with dirt. "Do you think she'll be to Commander Fabian's liking?" the leader of the group asked, while a big fat person from the troop walked towards them. "Sir Lucius, once she's all cleaned up, her beauty will show. Commander Fabian likes them this way," Fabian voiced out. "All right, she's coming with us. Take her," the leader of the group known as Sir Lucius Commander, as he turned around. "No, please, don't touch my daughter." The father kept pleading along with the two brothers. "Kyre," the girl screamed out as one of the men lifted her on his shoulder and started carting her away. She struggled, kicking and scratching, but she was no match for the strength of fully grown mixed bloods. "I have assisted you once again. Now, you only have 2 mouths to feed. No more complaints," Sir Lucius voiced out as he walked past the father, who quickly reached out to hold his leg. "Please, don't take her. She's only 16. He kept pleading, but it fell on deaf ears. Sir Lucius pulled his leg from the father's grasp and stomped on his head before he continued moving again. The father ignored his bleeding head and quickly jumped to catch Sir Lucius' leg again. "Please, I beg of you." Gustav, who was watching from the other side of the building, began to silently tremble as rage kept building up in his mind. This was a parent that was ready to sacrifice his all to save his child, even though the odds were against him, even though there was no hope whatsoever. He wasn't giving up. Gustav didn't know when he tightened his fist, causing it to make popping sounds as his entire arm vibrated. "Now, mind you, my boy, am not asking you to become a hero. Becoming a hero in this vast world is not only useless, but will also bring about your death. I'm only telling you not to turn a blind eye to something you know you can truly change. If you see a person is being inflicted with the same pain you went through, and you have the ability to put an end to it, don't turn a blind eye. You don't have to be a hero, but being numb to wicked deeds and the likes of those who are a nuisance to the community makes you no different from the people you hate. Boss Danzo's words kept reverberating in Gustav's mind as he watched the father of those kids being struck down again and again and again. The other neighbors in the vicinity also watched this cruel deed from their positions, but there was nothing they could do about it. Can you determine their power levels? Gustav suddenly asked the system. Why? The system asked with a suspicious tone. Just do it, Gustav commanded. All right. The leader is at the falcon rank, while the others are ranged in between Gilbert to Marshal. The gigantic one is peak Marshal like you. The system analyzed. Got it, Gustav stated as he noted all 20 of them, analyzing them with God eyes as well. Gustav proceeded to bring out a fox-like mask from his storage device and put it on. To avoid them calling for backup, I need to end them as quickly as possible, Gustav muttered as he closed his eyes. The instant he opened his eyes back, a pinkish flame appeared within it. The leader in front was about to kick the man away again when he suddenly sensed something and turned around to face the building Gustav was in. In the next moment, a wave of pinkish energy spread forth, covering the entire vicinity. Plop, 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 plop. Every single person within the troop fell to their knees as it made contact with them. The leader included. What in the world is this PWER? He voiced out while staring through his helmet, trying to look for the enemy. He and every other person in the troop were struggling to regain control of their bodies. Fwoosh! In the next moment, a white silhouette flashed by. A loud blade-like sound rang out, and before everyone could understand what was happening, heads began to fall. Chapter 5:25. Plop, plop, plop. The leader struggled to move his body as he saw the silhouette dash from place to place with a milky glowing dagger in its grasp and a weird-looking fox-like mask. His men couldn't even scream as they had lost control of their bodies. Helmets dropped one after the other with heads within them as fountains of blood kept jetting out of the headless bodies. Gustav arrived in front of the bulky guy who was lifting the teenage girl and stabbed him right in the left shoulder, severing his arm from his body before pulling the girl from his grip. Swisush! He dashed towards the front and dropped the girl beside her siblings. The girl kept vomiting after witnessing the cruel scene in front, while her little brothers had covered their eyes. Gustav reached out to the father next and picked him up. Take this, he handed him a medicinal pill, which the man put in his mouth, causing his injuries to quickly begin healing. Take your family away from here. Gustav's voice sounded extremely deep and powerful, different from his usual voice. Thank you. Thank you, the man appreciated as he quickly moved towards his kids and hurried them away from the scene. Swoosh! He dashed back once again towards the rest, who were still on their knees. Only about 7 of them were left. I have about 10 seconds more, Gustav said internally as he dashed towards the rest, activating sprint. Sprint has been activated. The troops could only hear the sounds of whooshing air, and the next thing they knew, a whitish blur had phased past them. It was so fast that they could see their vision turning upside down as their head fell to the floor before everything turned black completely. In 5 seconds, Gustav had murdered almost everyone, and at this point, 2 of them were left, the leader and the one gigantic one, who used the cannon-like gun the other time. Just as Gustav dashed towards them, a massive wall suddenly ascended from the ground and surrounded both of them. Gustav kept dashing forward and swung his blade once, causing the entire thing to be destroyed in one swing. But the instant he did that, a mighty spear-like light was already headed towards him. From the front, it had appeared right before him that dodging seemed impossible. Gravitational displacement has been activated. The force of gravity around him suddenly turned weird as the spear of light moved slightly towards the side while Gustav also swerved at full force. Swai-hai! The spear grazed his left shoulder, drawing a line on the surface that caused a drop of blood to roll down his sleeves. Flowish! Gustav arrived about 100 feet towards the side as he took in a deep breath. He had managed to escape that, but now the 5 seconds left were up. Both men instantly jumped to their feet the moment they regained control of their bodies. She and multiple rays of light suddenly converged around him, forming hundreds of spears barely, which he sent hurling towards Gustav. The gigantic one pulled the vest from his body and tore his upper clothes before revealing his muscular upper body. Jiarori-chech, he growled out as he increased in size, becoming about 11 feet in height, looking like a colossal being. Thump, 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 thump. His footsteps echoed as every step brought tremors to the vicinity. Gustav was currently dodging the light spears and slashing forward at those he couldn't dodge. The instant he managed to swerve forward, dodging all the projectiles that had destroyed a large portion of the street behind him, the colossal-looking guy was already leaping towards him. From above, Gustav quickly rolled towards the side, dodging the descent as the gigantic guy slammed into the ground, causing a massive wave of destruction to spread across the place. The moment Gustav arrived on the other side, the leader was already stabbing towards his chest with a light spear in his grasp. Gustav moved to the right and spun around quickly, sending his atomic blade towards the neck of the leader. Swish, the leader quickly pulled back his spear and spun it around, hitting Gustav's right hand away, and proceeded to send a punch towards Gustav's chest. Gustav leaned backward, dodging the punch, but just as his body was lowered, the colossal dude was pounding towards his head from behind with his 2 massive fists that were coated in rocky covering. Gustav's eyes slightly widened as he placed both hands on the ground after descending to a certain height and throwing his body upwards using his hand. Fly! Gustav turned his body towards the side as he ascended in the air, slipping in between the space of the colossal sky left and right hand. Gustav flew above his head and threw out a punch and sliced towards his back. Swai! Rocks appeared on the colossal guy's back as Gustav's atomic blade sliced across it from his neck down to his spine area. Due to this, he had managed to avoid getting killed instantly, as the blade only managed to cut 3 inches deep into his back after breaking through the rocky barrier he set up. He was blasted forward as Gustav arrived behind, ready to parry the attack of the leader again. "Who are you?" the leader asked as Gustav dodged his strike once again. "That doesn't matter because you will be dead soon," Gustav responded while sending out a strike. Once again, the leader was able to block. "Haha, I've just been going easy on you. I have no idea what you did before, but I'm sure you can't do it again. Now I will stop being holding back," he voiced out as a blinding light suddenly burst forth from his figure, pushing Gustav back. Meanwhile, the colossal dude had stabilized himself behind, ready to jump into the fight again. "You're wrong," Gustav muttered as his eyes suddenly emitted a fiery pink glow. Fume, pinkish energy suddenly blasted forth from his body, surrounding the entire vicinity. Plop, plop. Both of them fell to their knees again with shocked looks as Gustav dashed forward, while tightening his grip around the atomic blade. Check out my new story, Chronicles of Azeroth. Add it to your library, vote, and comment. If up to 1,000 people add it to their library before next weekend, it'll do a 5 chapters mass release for the Bloodline system. Thank you all. Chapter 5:26. Plop, plop. Both of them fell to their knees again with shocked looks as Gustav dashed forward while tightening his grip around the atomic blade. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash, swee-eye. His speed was like a blur to them as he zigzagged across the place. And before they both realized it, they saw their vision tilting. So this how it ends? This was the thought on both their minds, just before their vision blacked out. Plop, plop. Two heads and headless bodies fell to the ground, completely with blood jetting out as Gustav appeared on the far end of the street as the atomic blade in his grasp slowly began to disappear, while the blood surrounding it disintegrated into thin air as well. He retrieved his Yarki to save energy before walking towards the headless body of both Sir Lucius and the other gigantic mixed blood. If this was 7 months ago, Gustav wouldn't be able to use Yarki twice, but now he had devised a way to use it without using up the energy completely. Right now, he could use it thrice in a day as long as he targeted a particular range that he wanted to be affected. If he wanted to use it on a larger scale than this, he would have run out of energy completely. He quickly moved towards the spot where the head of the leader, Sir Lucius, fell and picked it up. Gustav removed the helmet, revealing the face of Sir Lucius to be a fairly handsome guy who looked no older than 30 with a scruffy black beard and braided hair. Noting the looks, Gustav started bringing all bodies of the group towards the interior area of where the broken-down house was. At this point, citizens in the area were peeping out their windows, and some even came out after witnessing what had just happened. They all wondered who this person with the fox mask was. After piling the bodies, Gustav moved towards the side of where the wall of the house used to be located. His body transformed a little, turning greenish as he bloated just before he proceeded to crouch and touch the ground. ZZRRGHH, ZZRRGHH, ZZRRGHH. Icicle-like walls shot out from the ground and started forming a barricade around the area, turning into a small household in a few seconds. The place became covered up, and the neighbors outside could no longer see what was going on inside. Gustav quickly took the clothes of Sir Lucius off along with the helmet and kept it in his storage ring along with his communication device. Gustav proceeded to bring out a small button-sized, silver-colored device. Beep. Tapping on it, he activated it and dropped it within the barricaded surrounding before starting to move towards the small opening he left above. Tum. Gustav jumped upwards, phasing through the small opening above, and proceeded to block that as well before jumping off. In the next few seconds, boom, a loud blast rang out within the barricade, causing it to vibrate intensely. The citizens in the vicinity saw a small hole blasted within the wall on the barricade Gustav set, and all they could see was smoke. Gustav had incinerated the bodies within. As Gustav moved away from there, dashing towards another region, he allowed the barricade he set to collapse. When it did, all that could be seen where the corpses initially were was only a patch of black. Everything solid within had been completely disintegrated. Dash, just who was the fox-masked man? Dash, is he on our side? Dash, who cares what side he is on? He saved that family, the people in the vicinity said amongst themselves. Gustav found a place to hide out a few minutes later and changed his outfit. Underground a small, nearly ruined building, Gustav was dressed in a black outfit holding a helmet. His face slowly morphed into that of Sir Lucius as he brought out the small communication device in his storage, which was currently ringing. It was a rectangular device that displayed the name of the person currently trying to communicate. Commander Fabian. This was the name displayed there, and from what Gustav remembered, this person should be higher up the ropes than this Sir Lucius. Gustav pressed his neck area as he coughed twice. His voice suddenly started changing, turning a little raspy before becoming deep and strong. This was the same way Sir Lucius sounded. He brought out some red liquid he stored within a storage ring and wiped it all over his face. Gustav finally answered the call a moment later. Lucius, where have you been? My goodness, what happened to you? A portrait-sized projection of a square-shaped face, middle-aged man with sharp eyes appeared in his line of sight. He noticed the blood smeared all over Lucius' face, which caused him to speak that way. There was a situation. All my men are down. We were attacked by unknown forces at the 21st region. Gustav reported with speed using Lucius' identity. What? Which group was responsible for this? The man in the projection asked with a look of fury. I'm still investigating that, which is why I was not able to respond in time. They had advanced weaponry just like us, and came prepared to battle with 5 times the amount of men I had with me. Gustav kept giving a fake report. Do you need backup? He asked. They are no longer in sight, but I am tailing some of their forces at the moment, so I might not show up for a while, Gustav answered. Is he also selling weapons to our enemies as well? That bastard. Gustav caught this statement and stared at Commander Fabian with a suspicious gaze. He wanted to ask who Commander Fabian was referring to, but that would blow his cover, since Lucius was supposed to know who this person is. It's most likely that he is doing just that. Is there any way we can get to him and propose a deal so he stays clear off the enemy? Gustav asked. Chapter 5:27. Good idea. He last mentioned he was heading to Region 32. That greedy bastard is probably hiding somewhere. They're selling these weapons to the highest bidder. He'll send some troops there to make him an offer he cannot refuse using my name, Commander Fabian stated with a smile. You're still as smart as ever, Lucius, he added. Gustav bowed his head slightly in respect. I have to go now, Commander. I don't want to lose the enemy's trail, he voiced out. Yes, be careful. I was expecting some beautiful girl today, but I understand the situation now. I'll make do with the ones I have here. A sadistic grin appeared on Commander Fabian's face before the communication was cut. Gustav's face turned a little dark after that as he slowly transformed back into his normal look. What do you think? The system asked from within. I can't jump into conclusions just like that. It's a battlefield, so there will definitely be more than one arms dealer. However, this is our first and only lead, so I might as well follow this one for now, Gustav analyzed. They were currently in Region 13, which was where the whole incident with the group went down. This easy victory was mostly achieved due to his use of Yarki, which he couldn't rely on again till it recharged completely. Also, he now knew that there were mixed bloods who could still activate their bloodline's abilities while under the hold of Yarki. This was something Gustav didn't expect, and now he knew his Yarki still wasn't powerful enough. His conversation with Commander Fabian was done to mislead them, which was why he mentioned Region 21. If Commander Fabian was going to send troops to check on Lucius, they would be sent to an entirely different location. So he believed that, for the time being, the kids and their father would be safe. Gustav didn't plan to remain in this get-up. He couldn't continue playing Lucius since he hardly knew anything about him. If he had adequate information about Lucius, he would have penetrated the Zalabin's clique using Lucius' identity. Still, if he decided to try it now, he would only be putting himself in harm's way since many things could blow his cover. He was just glad to have received a new lead. Region 32 is up to 1,500 miles away. You won't get there till evening, the system stated. It wasn't even mentioned among the suspected regions Sahel might be hiding. I guess the best way of figuring this out would be being a part of the fighting force. That way I would be able to gather information on where the arms are coming from, Gustav mumbled while taking off his clothes. He was currently changing back into his tattered-looking wear and putting Lucius' clothes into his storage device. Most of these weapons were being used majorly because the troops in battle were very weak. Besides people like Lucian and the other gigantic guy Gustav fought before this, most of the other mixed bloods were below the martial rank, and some of them had not even surpassed the Zulu rank. This was one of the reasons Gustav was asked to stay out of battle. Those who had reached his strength level would be considered big shots, so he could attract the attention of the battling forces here, which could end up blowing his cover. It was currently almost 12 noon, right now. Even though Gustav was very fast, it still took him at least 3 hours to travel a distance of close to 2,000 miles unless he went at full speed and used combination in the process. This would cause him to expend a lot of energy points, and he wouldn't want that to happen since he needed to save as much energy as possible. Using a fairly moderate pace would make him spend a long time traveling, but he would be able to save energy, and he also wouldn't attract too much attention to himself. After changing, Gustav decided to begin his journey. Dashing across the streets, he saw more and more demolished buildings devastated by the war. After about 2 hours of traveling, Gustav found himself blitzing across a battlefield. Boom, 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 boom. Explosions occasionally went off across the surroundings as troops from opposite sides kept firing different types of artillery. Thump. Gustav leaped upwards and landed on a 9-story building by the side. The position he leaped from erupted in flames a moment later as a projectile slammed into it. Gustav could sense up to 400 forces scattered across the place with his perception. Bodies were dropping every second, and even citizens living in this particular area kept running from place to place trying to escape. Gustav could see a massive crowd of no less than 100 headed towards the southwest area of this region of the city. Shrieks and cries filled the place as the crowd moved forward like their lives depended on it, because it did. Gustav dashed forward and leaped forward away from the building he was currently standing on. As his body traveled across the air, boom, the building he had just leaped from exploded into smithereens, causing debris to be scattered all across the place. Bam! Gustav landed on the ground and dashed forward once again, dodging projectiles sent at him, since, at this point, no one knew who the enemy was. They were random shots all across the place. Gustav initially didn't want to pass this region when he found out that a battle was happening here, but if he decided to go around it, his journeying time would go up by almost 2 hours. His goal was to arrive at Region 32, latest by 6, so he would have enough time to observe and go around the region before finding somewhere to hide out for the night. Right now, he had to scale through all this madness and ignore the cries of the citizens trampling upon each other in a bid to escape this region. Chapter 5:28. Right now, he had to scale through all this madness and ignore the cries of the citizens trampling upon each other in a bid to escape this region. Swoosh. Gustav activated dash and moved forward with speed, swerving all across the place and leaping upwards to avoid the troops on the other side. He suddenly noticed a massive mechanical piece of equipment structured to look like a panther towards the southeast side. It was robust and about 10 feet tall, with lots of weaponry stationed on its being. Fwhoop, 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 it suddenly shot out some missile-like projectiles. As Gustav dashed forward, he noticed that 4 of these missile-like projectiles were headed toward the escaping citizens. He suddenly paused his footsteps and slid forward before leaping towards the top of a tall tree by the side. The instant he landed on a branch at the top of the tree, he was catapulted upwards with force due to the elasticity of the branch. Ascending up to 1,000 feet in the air, Gustav's head transformed into that of the serpentine mixed breed with black scales and ram horns protruded out of his face. A purplish beam shot out of his mouth, traveling towards the missile-like projectiles. Gustav turned his head to the side while in midair to control the beam as it blasted across the sky, destroying all 3 missiles in one fell swoop. Boom, boom, boom. It exploded in the air above the crowd, escaping away. The force of the blast swept across the area, causing lots of people to be sent flying as it carried a lot of wind. Luckily, no one was harmed. Gustav landed back on the ground a few seconds later and found himself surrounded. Ting, 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 ting. A group of 10 men clad in red tight bodysuits and tight black armor on several parts of their bodies with a weird-looking black helmet had found their way to the top of the building Gustav leaped up from the other time. They all had weapons pointed at Gustav. "Which side are you on?" One of them voiced out as they powered their weapons. "Our side or the Lances group?" The person who seemed to be the leader of the squad voiced out. "None." The instant Gustav voiced this out. Super jump has been activated. Thump. He leaped forward with intensity, causing a blast to spread across the place as the top of the building gave way. "Kyre!" Screams rang out as all 4 of them fell through the top of the building, while the entire building still kept vibrating and cracks continued to spread across the place. The dust had also filled the entire rooftop at the moment. Still, Gustav's body was currently traveling across the air with speed. Luckily, he was currently using the face of another person, so even if they had seen his face, he could change his look later on. His body started to descend after he had crossed more than 3,000 feet in the air, as he flew for a few more hundred feet before landing up ahead. At this point, he could only see a few troops on this side, and they were all running forward to the location where the battle was directly ongoing. Gustav kept dashing forward till he was finally out of this region. It had expended him some energy going through all that, but he felt it was worth it as a notification popped up in his line of sight. Hidden quest complete. Save at least 10 citizens of Lineage City today. Rewards plus 20 attributes points plus 200,000 EXP. New skill unlocked. Hover, finally, a new skill. What does this one do? Hover. Maybe it has something to do with flight. Gustav decided to check on the information regarding hover. Hover, ability to make self or other objects float for a period of 6 seconds in midair, just as I thought. This is quite a convenient skill, Gustav said internally while a smirk appeared on his face. At this time, it was already evening period. Gustav still had about 2.5 more hours of traveling time before he reached his destination. The aircraft he was being transported in was attacked. In a small space that looked like a military base, a man in MBO uniform could be seen giving a report to a 57-tall lady with ash-colored hair. Have they figured out who orchestrated the attack? The lady asked with a vicious-looking glare. It was traced to the Al-Hida base camping in the Sahara Desert. However, when forces were sent there, the enemies were nowhere to be found. The man explained gently, not trying to piss the lady off by any means. Incompetent fools. Why does the MBO keep degrading every day? She voiced out with a cold and annoyed tone. The other officers in the vicinity did not dare say a word, even though they were being insulted. They just kept their mouths shut and focused on whatever they were doing. Give me the location. I'll take care of it myself, she commanded. But young miss, they're already gone. It would be a waste of time. The male officer tried reasoning with her. Give me the location now, she stated with a strong tone that left no room for arguments. The officer had no choice but to comply and voiced out the coordinates before passing a GPS to Miss Amy. In a blink of an eye, Miss Amy suddenly disappeared from the military base. It looked like magic to them, and they didn't sense the force from the speed till after 3 seconds had gone by. Fwy! The breeze suddenly blasted forth across the place, causing some pieces of equipment to be sent flying along with the walls vibrating. Initially standing in front, the officer was lucky to have braced himself for this, so he was safe laying on the ground. Phew, that was scary. I never want to be the one to talk to her again, he muttered with a relieved look. Chapter 5:29. Miss Amy was currently soaring through the clouds faster than the speed of sound with a GPS in her hand. Her long coat flapped due to the wind as she checked the coordinates on the GPS before stopping in midair. Got it, she muttered as a purplish glow suddenly started appearing around her. A destructive aura spread across the vicinity as Miss Amy suddenly soared forward. Suiziaithan, her body instantly blitzed forward, disappearing from view as it seemed like she went through a vacuum of space, causing her body to turn inexistent for a few seconds. Thum. In the next instant, she appeared about several thousand miles from her previous location. Still, she kept tearing across the sky with immense speed, causing the skies to be split. From below, a huge rift could be seen in tearing across the sky and repairing in the next few seconds. This caused scares all across cities and towns, as half of the entire Earth witnessed this same scene. It only took Miss Amy a few seconds to travel halfway across the Earth as she appeared like a deity above the Sahara Desert. The winds howled as multiple tornadoes were formed due to her sudden stop. Miss Amy floated downwards in the middle of the endless yellow sands. The moment her legs made contact with the sand, she turned around to stare in the southwest direction with a smirk on her face. Gotcha. When the skies were nearly darkened completely, Gustav arrived at Region 32. Region 32 was quite different from what he had expected. This place wasn't riddled with destruction and war like the rest. Instead, it looked eye-pleasing and luxurious. Region 32 was literally a stronghold. It had barricades surrounding it and a massive gate that prevented entry from people who weren't living in that part of the city. There were a lot of mansions and luxurious-looking buildings and households within. Lots of people were currently lining outside. They seemed to have been waiting for a long time, but weren't permitted entry into the region. The only things Gustav had seen going in and out of this place since his arrival here were luxurious-looking vehicles and convoys. Obviously, this region was for the rich and powerful who were not affected by the war. Gustav had no doubt that this place would remain safe till the end because he could see the number of guards stationed at different parts and patrolling the place in large numbers. Many people had tried to force their way in or sneak in, but they were caught, beaten up, and thrown far away from the gate. This served as an example to others who decided to stay their lane in fear of receiving the same treatment. Some of them were okay with waiting here anyway, because it was unlikely that any battle would occur here. So they felt safe even though they were standing outside. Gustav had made his way from place to place, starting conversations with people to know about the situation of the place, and these were the things he had figured out. He also found out that the poor people that weren't permitted to go in were given food every morning. Everyone here was coming from parts of the city that had been destroyed already, which was why the whole situation happened to be like this. Another piece of interesting information Gustav found was that this region was being controlled by two groups, the Zalabans and the Landsies. Gustav orchestrated a way to get in without being spotted. Many options came to mind as he slowly walked towards the gate. He waited till there was a convoy of vehicles approaching and brought out a button-sized device before placing it on his forehead. Cognitive concealment has been activated. His presence suddenly disappeared. And just as that happened, he tapped the button-like device he placed on his forehead. Zing! He instantly turned invisible. Nobody noticed this because he was within a crowd of people who moved towards the sides to avoid getting crushed by one of the incoming convoys of vehicles. Gustav, whose presence had disappeared along with his body outline, walked forward under the unsuspecting gaze of everyone and passed through the gate alongside the convoys. There were equipment that scanned everything coming in and going out of the region, which would uncover anything hidden. Gustav avoided leaping above the region gates because that would definitely cause some kind of attraction when his body made an impact with the ground after landing. So this happened to be the best way to get in without any suspicions. The technology scanning couldn't find him due to his cognitive concealment ability. The guards couldn't see him due to his invisibility. Walking through the gates, Gustav found a secluded place to go hide as he counted down. He quickly hid beside a building as the invisibility wore out and his body regained visibility. At this point, it was already nighttime, so Gustav could find a kind of secluded area to go change his clothes. He looked tattered and dirty, unlike how people living in this region would look, so he had to change into a standard outfit. He was glad he still had some of his clothes and quickly donned a red-colored jacket and black pants with fine-looking boots before getting a move on. The streets weren't completely empty, but they weren't completely filled either. Only a dozen of people could be seen moving around, and every single one of them looked well off compared to the people Gustav had met so far. Gustav's plan right now was to find somewhere to settle, so he could make his next plans from there. And that would be his hideout place where he could always come back to after finishing with one investigation or the other. If he found himself in any form of trouble, this would also be where he'd come back to hide out instead of running around the region like a headless chicken. He sneakily checked for directions on the GPS he was given and picked a location in Region 32 to move to. Chapter 5:30. She sneakily checked for directions on the GPS he was given and picked a location in Region 32 to move to. Gustav traveled halfway across the region, going past several streets before he arrived in front of what seemed like a pub. This place was the combination of a restaurant, a bar, and a lounge. It was quite massive with over 20 stories and looking quite luxurious as well. It was called the El Caso's place, and people could be seen going in and out of the place. It was very lively even though this was a period of war. This place was obviously a place to come have fun, as lots of ladies dressed in raunchy outfits could be seen. Guards were positioned at the entrance, and most of the people coming in had luxurious clothing on. Big bald men, with potbellies having 3 or more girls in their company, which showed some kind of wealth. Gustav moved towards the entrance and walked past the guards without any issues. They didn't stop him from going in, neither did they stop anyone, because no ordinary person would be in this region in the first place. Gustav moved straight towards the reception desk and registered for a place to sleep in for the night. Sleeping here for a night was up to 2,000, but money wasn't really an issue for Gustav. The only problem was he had limited cash stored in his storage device, which meant that after one more day he wouldn't be able to afford this again unless he made use of his debit card. Using a debit card in this place risked exposing him, so it wasn't an option. He had to think of alternative to handle the future situation. He later moved towards room 207, which was on the 17th floor. Gustav laid on his bed after arriving in the room few minutes back. It was quite large and luxurious enough, but that wasn't the purpose of getting it. Gustav checked his energy level and noticed that he had used quite a lot today. He had only 40% left. It had been a very long day filled with multiple events. He needed to recharge now so he could continue his investigation later without a hitch. He devised his next plans while waiting for his energy to get replenished. You deactivated the seal again? Young miss, that is another breach of contract. A middle-aged looking man with multiple small diamond-like shards embedded into his face voiced out with a tone of annoyance towards the young lady in front of him. Yeah, I completed you guys' job for you again. What are you getting so worked up about, old geezer? You should be thanking me. Miss Amy responded with an unbothered look while gesturing at the group of masked people tied together on the ground. They were currently in a location where only convoys could be seen moving around the place, along with MBO officers moving from place to place with different kinds of technological machinery walking as well. It seemed to be an MBO base of sorts. You're not allowed to deactivate your seal without permission. You caused a scare all across the world. Even Mac doesn't use such amount of power when in the Earth's atmosphere. This middle-aged man happened to be among the higher-ups, Grand General Isaacek. His rank was before that of the great commanders. I don't hear appreciation. Not only did they fail to get the culprits almost managed to launch another attack, if not for my intervention. TSK, the MBO had truly degraded with you airheads in position of authority. Miss Amy chided mercilessly, not minding Grand General Isaac's status. How dare you? Wait till I report this blunder to the great commanders, he voiced out before stomping off. That's pretty much your only option, since you can't do nothing about it. Miss Amy voiced out to his hearing, causing his forehead to twitch repeatedly as he moved away. Even though he had an higher rank than she did, he was among the grand generals that put up a lot of courage before speaking to her. They all genuinely feared her after witnessing the things she had done. The entire Sahara Desert would have been blown away if she had not controlled her power when descending, and the Grand General knew that if she willed to, the entire base would be destroyed in an instant. So even if he was putting up a tough act because of his ego, he was also trying not to piss Miss Amy off completely, especially when the only person who could go toe-to-toe with her was currently not in the galaxy. Miss Amy put a finger in her ear and rubbed it gently with a look of discomfort before she started walking away. So noisy. Cleaning up for you guys every time. And this is what I get in return, she muttered just before pausing in front of the group of 20, who were tied up together. These masked men began to tremble in fear as they noticed her presence. So you guys really wanted to bite more than you could chew, Her eyes turned dark as she voiced out, "I'll leave it to them to get answers out of you. I just might end up slaughtering you all if I conduct the interrogation myself," Miss Amy added before she resumed walking away. A smile appeared on her face as she remembered something. "You're doing good, kid. Let's see how you'll take care of the situation within the city," she mumbled before entering into a building on the other end. The next morning arrived, and it had officially been a day since Gustav got here. A day spent here seemed like a week to him. It was no simple thing to be in the midst of a way. Around midnight, the officers from the base in Ruhagi City reached out to him through the communication device to ask for a daily report. Chapter 531. Gustav spent about 30 minutes giving a brief rundown of what he had encountered on his first day here. He mentioned the fight he got into, but didn't explain the details, giving them the idea that it was an inescapable battle. He mentioned getting information from one of the groups. Still, he didn't really tell them that he used anyone's identity, and he finally explained to them that he was currently within Region 32 looking for clues. They mentioned that Region 30 was not among the suspected spots chosen. Nevertheless, Gustav explained to them what he had heard once again, which made him come check this place out. After giving him a little advice, they ended the communication and left Gustav to do as he willed. Everything was in his hands anyways. It's not like they could come here to take over the case themselves. Gustav had spent the entire night channeling his bloodline, even in this strange place. Luckily, he was able to complete his daily quest yesterday, while on the move to this place. Now that the next morning had arrived, it was time for him to gather information. Gustav moved out of his room a few minutes later after taking his bath and changing clothes. The morning on the streets of Region 32 was quite peaceful. Almost everyone had rides moving across the place, and only very few people could be seen walking on the road. Gustav wanted to move to a busy area beside the place he had resided for the night. While walking on the way, he would occasionally change his identity before moving towards any place that had more activity than others. Hours went by, and noon arrived in a bit. Gustav had spent the last 5 hours moving from place to place and gathering as much information as he could. He went around the entire region about 3 times, trying to see if he would notice any suspicious movements or locations. To his disappointment, he found no such thing. The entire region was so peaceful, and it seemed like no kind of transaction was going on in seclusion. Truly, this place was void of war, due to 2 of the 8 groups managing this place. The group Gustav had clashed with a day before was one of them that governed this region. And according to the information Gustav had gathered so far, they were on the sides of the world government. Gustav didn't really blame any side of the groups for the war, but witnessing what had happened the day before with the family he saved, Gustav held a grudge for this group, since there was a possibility of Sahil hiding out in this place. Gustav realized he might have to make use of Lucius' identity again. He had figured out the location where the members of Zalabans were situated in this section of the city. Gustav's next plan was to spy on them and figure out if any of their plans connected with his. He knew Sahil wouldn't be hiding out in any of these groups' official locations within this region, especially when it was said that whoever their dealer was also sold arms to the other side. If he was with them, Commandant Fabian wouldn't need to send any troops from over there to come and find him here. Understanding all this, Gustav initiated his plan to infiltrate into the base of the Zalabans in this region and tap their conversations. Cognitive concealment has been activated, making his presence disappear. Gustav dashed across the region and arrived behind a 24-story building in a few. He leaped upwards after checking the surroundings and arrived at the top of the building, which happened to be empty. From there, Gustav hid at a corner of the building and changed his outfit into that of a Zalaban troop. Aside from Luacua's outfit, he also took a normal Zalaban troop outfit which he kept in his storage device just in case. Lucius' uniform had a small silver star in the middle of his chest, which Gustav guessed signified authority, so he didn't put it on. Using the normal outfit would make him look like a normal troop, which wouldn't attract attention. Gustav found his way into the building by jumping towards the side and landing on a balcony. Although it was locked up, there was a small space on the windows. Gustav made use of size manipulation to slip in and found his way to the corridors. This was when he found the place a bit busier than he expected. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Other people dressed just like him with the dark outfit, vest, and helmet could be seen walking around. Gustav asked for directions to the leader's office after finding out how the rankings in this place went. Arriving there, he was told the leader wasn't in at the moment, and he would have to come back. Gustav already knew this, which was why he came. He decided to approach here in the first place. Asking for the restroom on this floor, Gustav moved there quickly. He made use of another invisibility chip before dashing out. He was able to break into the leader's office by picking up the key card placed on the secretary's table without her knowledge. All she felt was an immense wind blowing across the place, which caused her to get disoriented as multiple pieces of paper flew across the place. Gustav used this to his advantage, opening the office door and getting in quickly to place the tapping device underneath the office chair. It only took less than 10 seconds for all this to be done, and he was out of sight by the time the winds had calmed. The lady at the desk looked confused as she picked up the files that had fallen. After the invisibility wore out, Gustav made his way out of the building, still using the identity of the dead subordinate Lucius. Akim. A loud voice suddenly called out to him the instant he stepped out of the building. Chapter 532. Akim. A loud voice suddenly called out to him the instant he stepped out of the building. Gustav turned to the side with a look of confusion and spotted a beautiful-looking young woman with short green hair headed towards him from the other end of the street. She was also dressed in a black outfit, but unlike Gustav, she had her helmet taken off. She held it by her side as she approached Gustav. Gustav turned to look forward and started walking. Akim, where are you going? Wait for me, she voiced out while increasing her movement speed, and arrived behind Gustav before placing her hand on his shoulder from behind. We weren't supposed to see each other till next week. Why did you come here? She asked while moving to Gustav's front. Did you miss me that much? She asked with a seductive voice while reaching out to hug Gustav. Gustav pulled her from his embrace and spoke. I think you have the wrong person, he voiced out before proceeding to walk past her. Come on, Akim, are you still mad at me? She asked while still following Gustav. No, am not. I don't even know you. You have the wrong person, Gustav responded while still walking forward. That's harsh, she said with a crestfallen tone, but still kept following Gustav. New quest has been issued. Information: help comfort the poor lady. Rewards plus 200,000 EXP. God eyes level up. Gustav suddenly paused his steps as he noticed these new notifications. The hell is this? How do I comfort her? Gustav wondered as he turned to stare at the lady beside him, who also paused when he did. What exactly do you want from me? Gustav asked with an intrigued tone, hoping to find some clues as to how to finish this quest. Come on, Akim, stop being like this, and let's go somewhere private. I miss you too, your touches, your kisses. I love you, she said with shimmering eyes. This is going to be a problem. I think I should skip this quest, Gustav said internally. Hidden punishments. The system suddenly voiced internally with a light chuckle. You even changed your voice trying to trick me. But you've forgotten that I patched this uniform for you right here. The young woman touched the neck area of Gustav's outfit as she spoke. Even though it's barely visible, since you said it yourself that I'm good at this stuff, I would still recognize it anywhere. Along with your stature, of course, she laughed lightly after getting to this point. Underneath the helmet, Gustav's eyes widened with a look of understanding. So that's why? This was now a situation where he had no choice but to play along, or he'd be risking exposure. There was literally proof on the outfit that it belonged to this Akim. And from the looks of things, Akim and this unknown lady were in a relationship. Akim was already dead, since Gustav killed him a day before. But luckily Gustav remembered the face underneath the helmet and slowly started transforming to it. It was a dark-skinned face, attractively shaped, with a buzz cut, his voice tone. This was the only issue Gustav had now. He never heard this dude speak, so he had no idea how he was going to mimic it. I had an incident in the last mission which affected my voice. I'm not doing this on purpose. Luckily, Gustav's already made the tone of his voice raspy right from time. "Oh my, Akim, are you okay?" she asked with a look of concern while taking off his helmet. Gustav had already allowed some lines of injury to appear across his face, so the instant she did that, she could see Akim's face with a lot of injuries. She held his face with concern and pulled him into her embrace again. "I'll ask Father to let you stay here with me. I can't bear to lose you," she voiced out before leaning in and placing her lips on Gustav's. The people passing by had smiles on their faces as they noticed the couple kissing. Gustav had to wing it and pretend as he kissed her back. "Akim, you seem more passionate than before. You used to be so bad at kissing," she voiced out after withdrawing from him. Gustav didn't know how to respond to that. He only had his first kiss a few days back, and here he was kissing a random stranger that he was only just meeting for the first time. Quest completed, he noticed the notification appear in his line of sight. "So, you just wanted me to kiss a complete stranger, huh?" Gustav voiced out internally. "Don't pretend like you didn't enjoy it." The system responded with a snicker. "Gustav." Minutes later, Gustav and this unknown lady found themselves in a luxurious apartment. "They'll be right back after taking a shower," she said while winking at Gustav. The instant she went in, Gustav bolted out the door and found his way out of the building. He quickly moved towards the nearest restroom and changed his outfit while he transformed into the look he initially used on his first day here. An oblong-shaped face with a mustache and small beard makes him look older. Gustav slowly walked out of the restroom a few moments later with a look of relief while moving towards the room he had booked a night before. He had decided never to use that uniform again, and also made his stature different from Akim. He was sure Akim was cursing him from the afterlife right now. Not only did he murder him, but he also kissed his girl, and they would have gone further if he didn't find his way out of there. In a few minutes, Gustav arrived back in the room he booked and sat on the bed as he brought out some equipment. Tri-Eye, a small disc-looking device, made a weird noise as it projected a black and white X-ray-like projection of the floor, where the leader was located in the Zalabin's Region 32 base. Chapter 533. It displayed the office along with the secretary, as well as other people moving across the floor. It also projected sound, so Gustav had no issue in hearing what was going on. Now his next move was to sit and wait. Just who was that lady? She strikes me as someone with a kind of power, Gustav wondered, as this was what his intuition told him. He remembered seeing a picture frame of a man in the apartment. He figured he was probably a family member, since Akim was who she was in a relationship with. I ran a background check on the database of the Zalabins. The system suddenly spoke. "You can do that?" Gustav asked. "I'm the greatest computerized base machine in all of existence. I can do that and even more. I just chose not to most times, so you can figure things out yourself, Dumbo." The system voiced out. "Fair point," Gustav stated. "Get over here," the system voiced out, and in the next instant, Gustav felt his mind being pulled into another realm as his vision turned completely white, and his eyes glowed crimson for a few moments. His mind was pulled into another place, and he found himself in a wide hall. The hall was immensely large and wide. The beginning and the end could not be seen, but there seemed to be spots that had different kinds of things placed around. Far behind, Gustav could see pillars of different sizes. But these pillars weren't really pillars. They were actually rectangular in shape and transparent. Some reddish liquid was stored within these pillars. Every pillar had pints of these reddish liquids stored in a lined-up format. To the left, Gustav could see things like shelves lined up in rows and columns. These shelves had scroll-like objects placed within them. He instantly recognized this place to be the system's inner space. A short girl with a unicorn-like horn in the middle of her forehead, sporting long pinkish hair, could be seen walking towards him from up ahead. It was the system astral body form, just as Gustav recalled. She was clad in a long, whitish, glowing gown. The gown was so long that it swept across the floors as she walked forward. She looked to be around 12 years of age with her small stature, but her eyes looked extremely sharp. She looked extremely cute. Innocent-looking face, but very dirty tongue. Gustav voiced out the instant she arrived in front of him. "Shut up, twat." "Hard-looking guy, but still a virgin," she responded before bursting into laughter. Gustav could not help but get annoyed whenever the system spoke. 90% of her words were always aimed at trying to discredit him in one way or the other. In fact, staring at her right now made him feel really ticked off. His usually unbothered demeanor was nowhere to be found right now. "Anyways, let's get to business," she said before snapping her fingers. A projection of the lady Gustav met earlier, along with the picture he found, appeared. "These two are father and daughter," the system began explaining. "The father happens to be a sibling to the head of the Zalabins. So this lady, Lydia, is the nephew of the most powerful person in the Zalabins," she added. "Oh, this could have gone really bad then," Gustav muttered with a contemplative look. "Or I can really use this to my advantage," he added with a slight look of confliction. "You don't need to use her right now, since the people Commander Fabian sent over haven't arrived yet. Besides, if you want to make use of her, you might have to use your body, and it is even more risky when you have no information whatsoever on Akim," the system analyzed. "Exactly. If I'm going to make use of her, it has to be in extreme situations. For now, I can continue with the investigation on my own," Gustav stated. The system showed him a few more clips before sending his mind back to his body. Gustav's sight returned back to his room. That was a bit rough. "Anyways, let's continue," Gustav muttered as he stared at the black and white projection. After some time, he decided to check out the new features for God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's sight instantly turned red and blue as his sight phased through the entire building. "Wow," Gustav exclaimed as he zoomed in and noticed that he could see through the entire next 3 streets, all the people moving, the internal structure of the walls, and even people having S*X on the top floors. He quickly zoomed his eyes out as he spotted the couple making out. "I shouldn't have seen that," Gustav mumbled before turning to another side to continue examining the new features of God Eyes. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into hours, and hours turned into an entire day gone by. The office he tapped hadn't even been opened once throughout the entire day. And just like that, today would be Gustav's 3rd day arriving here. Gustav was starting to develop an idea of wanting to move across the region again, inspecting places while using God Eyes, but he didn't know if he might miss something while being away. The footage being displayed was under recording, and he'd be able to rewind and check if something happened, but he felt that a situation that needed urgent response might occur, and then he'd be too late in making a move. Gustav decided to wait for a little while and move out when it was noon. Time went by, and in a flash, noon arrived. Still seeing the office was empty as usual, Gustav prepared to leave his room. Getting to the shower, he took his bath and did other necessities in less than 2 minutes before changing his outfit. Just as he prepared to leave, he noticed the arrival of a group of people on that particular floor being displayed in the footage. Who are these guys? Gustav noticed they were 6 in number and moved closer to stare at the black and white projection properly. The secretary instantly stood to her feet and bowed in respect as this group of men arrived before her desk. Finally, Gustav said internally. Chapter 534. The secretary instantly stood to her feet and bowed in respect as this group of men arrived before her desk. Finally, Gustav said internally. Gustav zoomed in the black and white footage on a particular one of them, who he recognized to be this region-based leader. He passed down some instructions to the secretary before moving into the office with the others. The office was like a living room with sofas surrounding a luxurious-looking table. This group of three all found places to sit the moment they moved in and began to converse with each other. Region Leader Khan, I'm sure you know by now that we were sent by Commander Fabian, the one on the left voiced out in a reminding tone. Of course, he mentioned to me that you are to pass a message to the arms dealer. Leader Khan, who was seating on the other end of the table, voiced out. Exactly, we need to meet with him as soon as possible, since the fate of this war mostly lies on his method of arms distribution, the one on the other side added. We can't have him selling to the other side, the one on the left voiced out again. I understand. He is truly in this region, but we have no idea where his exact location is. Leader Khan stated. How good must this dude's cover-up be that it's hard for even the group in authority here to locate him? Gustav said internally as he continued paying attention to their conversations. Before the two who were sent over from Commander Fabian's place could respond to that, Leader Khan spoke. However, he did give us a means of contacting him. Leader Khan added before bringing out a small rectangular-shaped device. The two visitors fixed their eyes on this device as he brought it out. Oh, so we can contact him and set up a meeting using this device, the one on the left voice out in understanding. Precisely. Let's do that now, Leader Khan stated before tapping a particular button on the device. Trigaya, a weird, flat, and long beeping sound rang out as they waited. After a few seconds, it stopped, and the leader proceeded to tap it again. After two more tries, it made a weird connecting sound, and a voice was heard next. Mr. Khan, I am sure I just delivered some arms to you recently. Are you in need of more? A deep voice with a weird accent could be heard coming from the device. Haha, arms are never enough, my friend, but this time we need something different from you, Leader Khan responded. Slick SL, we were sent here by our commander to request for you to stop selling arms to the enemy side, the one on the left voiced out. So you guys figured out that it was me, and I was careful enough to sell different brands and models. Where did I slip up? The voice from the other side sounded a bit surprised as it responded. Looks like my theory was right, Gustav said internally as he heard this. He was the one who informed Commander Fabian about this without any proof because this was what he suspected after analyzing a lot of things. The two sent by Commander Fabian stared at each other for an instant before turning to face the device again. Well, we wish for you to stop selling to the other side so their troops can be weakened. We can easily win this war in no time, the one on the left voiced out again. Ha ha ha. A small laugher was heard from the other end for a few seconds before the voice responded, Why should I? A longer period of war, for me, means more profit. And might I remind you all that I'm a businessman. I put business first, he stated. Slick SL, might I remind you that you're in our territory. Selling to our enemies as well isn't a very nice thing to do, especially to people who have treated you well, Leader Khan said with a solemn tone. And I really appreciate your good deeds, but like I said, my business comes first, Slick SL said with a slightly appreciative tone. We understand you very well, Mr. Slick, which is why we want to have a sit down with you. We will make you an offer that is good enough to stop you from selling to the other side. The man on the left spoke again. An offer. Are you sure it can meet my expectations? The voice asked from the other side. Very much certain. Commander Fabian never disappoints. The man on the left responded again. How about 2 days from now? The voice on the other end proposed. Sounds good, Location? They asked again. I'll let you know on the morning of that day. I expect no foul play from your end, but just in case I will bring enough protection from my side, the moment after the person finished voicing out. The communication was cut. The three men in the office stared at each other before Leader Khan spoke. I suppose you two will be here for some time then. Let me get you settled in a comfortable and safe environment. Leader Khan voiced out before proceeding to use another communication device to contact someone. We appreciate the gesture, Region Leader Khan. Both men voiced out with an appreciative tone. At this point, Gustav had stood to his feet and was standing by the side of the bed, contemplative gaze while staring at a piece of information displayed in holographic format. Turns out it was truly Sahil. Gustav muttered while staring at a list. Alias, SL, Slick SL, Shadow Distributor. Sahil had different names he went by, and Slick SL just happened to be one of them. It had only been 3 days, and Gustav was already on his trail. Now the next step was to implement a good plan and make sure he didn't slip from his hands. Chapter 5:35. Also, he had to get hold of the location in the next 2 days when Sahil contacted them again. Who are these two that were sent by Commander Fabian? Gustav wondered as he stared at the projection. He noticed that they were leaving the office with a woman who seemed to be guiding them. Gustav quickly looked around his room. He wanted to leave and get over to that part of the region, but going through the elevators would waste time. He moved towards the left where the balcony was located and stared at the street up ahead. It was up to 500 feet in height, but this was nothing Gustav hadn't handled before. In fact, he had dealt with worse. Gustav leaped through the balcony, traveling several hundred feet in midair as his body flew above several buildings in the process. Silent advancement has been activated. As he landed on a building in front, there was barely any sound. Swoosh, dashing forward. He leaped above several buildings in a diagonal format as he traveled towards the Zalabin's region base. After a minute, he arrived before the street where the building was located and started walking forward. He instantly spotted the two men coming out of the building with the woman in front of them, who gestured towards a luxurious-looking hovercar parked by the side. Gustav moved to the side and kept watching them sneakily as the engine started and zoomed off across the street. They drove at moderate speed, so Gustav was able to follow them with sprint. Swoosh. He was barely visible when he moved across the street, so he didn't garner attention, especially when the streets were scanty as well. As Gustav followed after them from a good distance while activating God Eyes, which could now pin onto targets, he noticed that they were headed in a familiar direction. In about a minute more, everything clicked as they arrived right in front of the same location Gustav was currently residing, El Caso's place. This was the only part of this region that was always bubbling with activity. Beautiful ladies dressed in raunchy and baiting outfits moved about the place. As both men who were sent here to see Commander Fabian got off the vehicle, some of the ladies in the vicinity started winking at them and giving them all sort of seductive looks. The woman who was leading them stared at these ladies with disgust as she walked into the place with the two who ignored the ladies. Maybe we can have some fun later. This place doesn't seem bad, the one on the left said to the other one after they walked in. Well, we have 2 days of freedom, so yeah, it won't be bad to have a little fun while we wait. The other one responded with a low tone. The woman leading them heard their words and thought, aren't they both married? Men will always be pigs. She arrived before the reception and conversed with one of the females at the desk while gesturing at the two males behind before receiving a gold card. They proceeded to move towards the elevator area. Just as they got in and moved to the side, waiting to be teleported to their floor, Gustav suddenly moved to the same elevator. The men stared at the young man with a mustache and small beard for a moment, wondering how someone could be so bold as to enter the same elevator with a Zalabin. Gustav nodded at them. Good day, sirs, good day, ma'am. He voiced out respectfully before moving towards the side, acting like he wasn't even there. After observing him for a few moments, they concluded that Gustav was just a clueless nobody and didn't see it as a big deal to let him stay in the same teleportation elevator with them, especially when the place was big enough. A few moments later, they were teleported to the last floor, which happened to be the most luxurious one. Only a few spaces were available here, but every room was like an entire house with multiple relaxation centers, and people had better services. Room 12B was stated on the gold card, and it was just down the beautiful-looking hallway. At this point, Gustav didn't keep following them. He moved towards a side of the hallway that led to the top of the lounge building and stood there. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes zoomed through and focused on the three headed towards the left. Normally, they would be out of sight, but God Eyes was just too powerful now. After noting their room, Gustav moved back to his own room. The issue now was he would be kicked out of his room by nightfall, since that was when his accommodation period would expire. He had put the first phase of his plans into motion, but to continue, he would have to remain in this place. Gustav's hair slowly morphed back into its dirty blonde color as his face transformed as well. His initially oblong-shaped face returned back its usual shape with his well-outlined jawline and charming young facial features along with his attractive lips. Gustav's height reduced a little back to 5'11", with his slightly muscular frame returning as well. He proceeded to change his clothes and back to the MBO uniform before reaching for his left wrist. Tap. Truin, a silver-colored bracelet, appeared on his wrist with 4 blue bars. Time to find out if this will work, Gustav said internally while tapping on it several times. A circular blue, glowing icon appeared after a few moments, and Gustav proceeded to tap it. Initiating spatial jump, a computerized voice rang out just before a blinding flash of light surrounded Gustav. Truinen. Gustav noticed the vicinity narrowing as he found his body being sucked into a tunnel of whitish light. In the next moment, he found himself standing in the midst of a forest area. Chapter 536. In the next moment, he found himself standing in the midst of a forest. Gustav looked around, and on the right side, he could have trees that depicted a part of the forest that was decimated. Turning to look behind him, he could see hundreds of feet away, a clear space where different sizes of tents were erected. This was the same place he arrived in on the first day, the base within one of the forests in Ruhagi City. It worked, but not entirely accurate in its coordinates, Gustav muttered as he stared at where his personal tent was located. The tent where he slept on his first day here was where he had used it as a checkpoint, yet he was teleported hundreds of feet in front. Maybe it's an interference from the city's dome. Gustav felt this was the only explanation that made sense. Officer Millie Brown, who happened to be moving around at that time, turned to stare at the forest area as her eyes squinted. After a few moments, she turned back around. I guess it was nothing, she muttered while letting her guard down and moving away. Gustav, who was 100 feet away, was hiding behind a tree as he turned to the side to look in her direction. After confirming that she was out of sight, he slowly moved forward while activating a skill. Cognitive concealment has been activated. His presence instantly disappeared as he dashed across the forest a moment later. Gustav traveled towards the city and arrived there in about a minute. He didn't want to stir any drama or bring attention to himself, so he quickly moved towards the closest bus stop. Gustav boarded the transport and headed towards the closest bank. Arriving at the biggest bank in the city, Gustav brought out his debit card. This was the first time he would be using it in a month. He headed towards the nearest private withdrawal booth and proceeded to check his balance first. Name: Gustav Crimson. Balance: $39,007,892. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he spotted the balance. It's only been about 7 months. How did it get this high? He muttered with a surprised expression. Looks like things are going well in Plankton City. Gustav thought. That was the only explanation for this. He only just created the organization and explained to them what was meant to be done. It looked like his workers had been doing well. Gustav remembered them, along with Angie's father and his partnership with Sergon. I should try visiting them after checking up on Boss Danzo. Gustav thought. It would be nice to see the progress of everything he started personally. Gustav proceeded to withdraw a large sum of money and stacked his storage device with them. This way, he wouldn't need to worry about using cash in Region 32 since he couldn't afford to use his card. Leaving a trail or any form of connection behind was dangerous. A few moments later, Gustav moved out of the bank and proceeded to start completing his daily routine. He had already completed one. Now only 2 were left. Break into a secure facility and break out without arousing any suspicions. Gustav read the second daily task. Did you forget that I now have quite a number of invisibility buttons with me? This can be finished easy, Gustav said to the system as he moved away from the bank area. Minutes later, Gustav found himself at the vault of a bank staring at a massive-looking diamond that kept oozing out energy. This is tempting, Gustav said as he moved closer to the diamond. The entire vault only had about 2 or 3 more valuable items within, but this one seemed to be the most valuable item from Gustav's analysis. In fact, the amount of energy oozing from it made Gustav feel like absorbing it into his energy containers, but he had used God eyes to look around the whole place. The instant he messed with it, an alarm would be sent out, and he would fail the system's task. Interesting. This must be another type of energy fragment. Gustav only studied it for a few seconds more before moving towards the entry and exit point of the place. His looks at this point were not his original, neither was he dressed normally. He was dressed in a staff outfit, holding a key card that gave him access in and out of the bank. Poor Ahmed. This one time, you just have to be the scapegoat, so I can complete this task. Gustav said this internally with a tone of pity, but his face didn't display any pity. A few minutes later, Gustav was out of the place and back to his usual look. Daily task completed 2/3, infiltrate a highly secure facility without arousing any suspicions. Mixed bloods at Gustav's level of strength couldn't even manage to pull all these kinds of stuff off. But Gustav had so many options in his arsenal, so doing this was no biggie as long as he implemented it well. He would be a very big menace to society if he decided to turn bad at the moment. Gustav proceeded to go complete the 3rd task. Daily task 3/3, demonstrate your strength by stopping a vehicle moving at full force. What is the point of having me do this? Gustav said while rolling his eyes. It's fun to see how much your strength has improved. Besides, I don't set this. It's automated. The system voiced in his head with a light chuckle. Gustav nearly face-bombed as he walked across the street, not knowing how to go through with this one. Just as he arrived at a particular intersection, a loud whistling sound was heard across the air. Gustav turned to look up and noticed a projectile flying across the air. Flied before anyone could react. It slammed into the floating rail towards the southeast part of the sky, hundreds of feet above the ground. Boom! A massive explosion went off as parts of the rail fell towards the building below. There were screams everywhere as parts of the building blasted across the place and fell towards the street. Chapter 537. It was a full-blown disaster as everyone in that vicinity ran for their dear lives. The sounds of wailing could be heard. It seemed like some people had been physically affected by this incident. Gustav didn't instantly sweep into action because of his current looks. He was still wearing the MBO uniform. So transforming into another face wasn't very sensible since they could check the database and find out that such a person wasn't a part of the MBO. He quickly proceeded to take out the fox mask from his storage bracelet and charge forward with immense speed. Fwum! A burst of wind blasted across the place as Gustav arrived in the midst of the chaos. The first thing he did was leap upwards as he spotted a massive rail line falling towards a group of people on the ground trying to get away. He grabbed it as he ascended above and landed on a rooftop in the distance before dropping it there. The instant Gustav finished doing these, he heard loud screams coming from above and below. He looked up and noticed that the floating rails above that now had a disconnected part had a train coming over from the other direction at full speed. The passengers, along with the engine man, were all screaming as they noticed the nearly 100-feet gap between both disconnected rails up ahead. Because that part was slightly sloppy heading downwards, it wasn't noticed earlier. So the train was only a few feet away by the time the engine man proceeded to try and stop the train. Gustav leaped away from the current building he was standing on and landed on the ground, right below the disconnected rail. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav started growing in size as the train arrived at the ledge. He stretched out his enlarging palms and caught the massive train as it fell. His body remained the same size, but his arms were almost as large as the building by the side. The people in the train had widened eyes as they stared at the massive palms grabbing hold of their train as all the coaches moved towards the side while falling. Gustav groaned a little as he bore the force of the train and tightly grabbed hold of its body, causing parts of the window areas to blast into pieces. This injured some passengers within, causing Gustav to soften his grip a little. At this point, cracks had appeared on the ground all around Gustav as he held the train up for a few moments before he slowly started to bring down his massive arms. The train made a loud sound of collision as Gustav allowed the last couch to make contact with the street first before releasing the rest. At this point, the entire street was baffled and filled with admiration as they wondered who Gustav was. He must be a prestigious MBO officer. This was the thought in most of their minds after witnessing this feat, however. They couldn't see Gustav's face due to his mask, neither could they recognize this stature. He was also wearing a black MBO uniform, which indicated that he was at the lowest tier, and this didn't make sense to some of them because they believed someone as strong as this should be higher. Gustav deactivated size manipulation, causing his arm length to slowly retract back to normal as he completely let go of the train. Daily tasks completed. March 3rd, demonstrate your strength by stopping a vehicle moving at full speed. Gustav stared at the notification for a moment, scoffing internally. It was almost like the disaster that occurred was a convenient scenario for him to complete this task. He stared in the direction where the projectile that crashed into the rail came from, and noticed it was coming from the direction that led to Lineage City. How powerful must it be to pass through the dome? Gustav wondered, but then he remembered that going out of the city was easier than going in. He internally shook his head as he turned around and dashed away. Swoosh, the people in the vicinity didn't get the chance to thank him before he disappeared from the place. All they could recall him as was the masked fox officer. Gustav had to leave because he sensed the authorities approaching the area, including the officers stationed within the forest working on the operation with him. The authorities later arrived on the scene and helped out with the rest of the situation while questioning the survivors. Gustav headed towards a secluded part of the city and tapped on his left wrist again. Time to head back, he muttered while staring at the silver bracelet, which now had 3.5 blue bars. Gustav tapped a few more times and activated the bracelet, causing a bright white light to envelope him. Zing! He disappeared an instant later. They received an information about the number 1 best first-year cadet leaving camp on a mission. They were given the coordinates of where he'd be leaving from, and they made use of that information to send the war jet after him. A bald man dressed in MBO uniform said with a respectful attitude while standing in front of Miss Amy, "I see. So, where exactly did this information come from?" Miss Amy asked. "The source is anonymous. They have no idea where it came from. They just received the information and acted on it. They didn't think they'd be caught," he explained. "And they wouldn't have been. If I didn't act, you lots would have screwed it up," Miss Amy chided mercilessly. A terrorist organization getting this kind of information gave Miss Amy the impression that someone within the MBO wanted Gustav gone. Such information could only have been leaked by an insider, but the good thing was nobody had an idea about the mission Gustav was given, neither did they know where he was headed. They only knew the pickup point where Gustav left from. Miss Amy had a look of relief as she recalled picking the pilot herself. The pilot did well in destroying the jet and protecting Gustav. Find out who this anonymous source is, Miss Amy instructed before walking away. She had several suspicions, so her plan was to make investigations on her side also. Chapter 538. She had several suspicions, so her plan was to make investigations on her side also. The officer had looks of fear and confliction on his face as he turned around to head back to the room where all the criminals that orchestrated the attack were placed. Gustav arrived back in his hotel room at this point and took off his mask. His bracelet had only 3 bars at this point, which indicated he could only engage in spatial travel about 6 more times before it ran out of power. At this time, it was late in the evening, and Gustav had been away for about 2 hours. He proceeded to move towards a device he placed on the side of the table and tapped on it. Earlier, when he was in the teleportation elevator, he had sneakily placed the tapping device somewhere on the last floor before he left. The tapping device was powerful enough to cover the whole floor, so Gustav didn't have to put it in their room directly. The only difference was when it was placed farther from the location that wanted to be observed, it was harder to get a clearer view and sound. This was why he placed it directly in the LeaderCon's office the other time to get a clearer outline and audio. He wasn't really worried this time because he only wanted to observe their activities, and not really the sounds. Gustav rewinds the recording as he focuses on their side of the room to sort through what had gone down so far. All he noticed was both men freshening up to change outfits to use the pool in the balcony area. It really seemed like a vacation to them. And just as Gustav suspected, he was right. They truly wouldn't be doing anything besides waiting for Sahil to contact them in the next 2 days. Gustav fast-forwards to the present time back, where he could see a bunch of beautiful ladies in the room and around the pool dressed in swimsuits. About 9 ladies in total were present in the vicinity, messing around with the 2 male officers. At the same time, they were being served by a lounge worker bringing them drinks and all sorts of exotic meals. The 2 men were really having the time of their lives pampered by these ladies while the war was going on in other regions, and people were getting killed by the minute. Gustav shook his head. The ones in high places are never involved when dangerous situations break out, even though they happen to be the cause. Innocents are bound to always suffer for a cause they didn't start as long as they are at the bottom. Gustav could imagine himself being in this scenario if this was happening in Plankton City, and he never had an encounter with the system. Weakling will forever blame their unfortunate fate, and he didn't want to ever be in a situation like that, which was why power still remained his main goal. Especially when corrupt people who don't care about the lives of the innocent are at the top of the hierarchy. Gustav felt the urge to commit assassination on all top officials in this city. Still, with his current state of strength, this was impossible to achieve. He might be able to pull off 1 or 2, but there were forces on the side of the higher-ups who were stronger in hiding. Besides, this wasn't a part of the mission. He would literally be branded as wanted if he managed to pull any of the assassinations off, which would just be throwing all his hard work to waste. Gustav wasn't even trying to be a hero, but he found the acts of these people despicable and saw himself in the shoes of those trying to escape to keep their lives. Anyhow, he still wouldn't try and overdo anything or get involved in this crisis since it wasn't his battle to fight. Gustav kept watching the footage, and the whole messing around went on till nightfall, where both men sent all the girls away except for the 2 they really wanted to spend the night with. Gustav listened in a bit to the cracking sound of their conversations and pieced something together. One of them was attracted to the girl he asked to stay behind and still wanted her to come over the next morning after their night enjoyment had ended. Gustav had to shy away from the holographic display a few minutes later due to the graphic content playing out in front of him. This wasn't a scene that he was interested in witnessing. Wouldn't it be better for you to watch now and practice? That's a very experienced man giving you free teaching, and you're not taking opportunity of it. The system suddenly voiced in his head as Gustav lay on the bed. What the hell are you talking about? I'm not interested in seeing the body of a middle-aged man. That's homosexual, Gustav responded. Not if it's for research purposes. I tell you, you'll disappoint Angie in the future costs. You know nothing. The system chided with a burst of light laughter. No, I don't want to hear this, Gustav said as he took the pillow and covered both ears with it subconsciously. I live in you, the system reminded. Fuck you, Gustav said internally with a frustrated look. He didn't really use cuss words anymore, but the system always found a way to get it out of him. On a serious note, you need to get used to this because you never know what could happen when you're looking away, the system advised. Why are we still talking about this? Gustav asked. Are you getting dumber? I'm giving you a realistic theory here. The system pointed out. Sigh. All right, I get your point, but come on, you can't expect me to sit through and watch all that? Gustav said, while seating up. If it was a murder pertaining to a case you were working on, you'd watch it without battling an eyelid, right? The system asked. Chapter 539. Yes. Gustav responded affirmatively. This is just the same thing. To be a professional, you have to get used to seeing anything and everything. This could really become something that might have a negative effect in the future if you keep running from it. The system explained. Gustav sighed once again and stood to his feet before moving towards the table where the projection was displayed. Gustav was glad the sound system wasn't very effective. His face showed immense discomfort as he watched the graphic was displayed. It seems things are getting intense. Around midnight, the base reached out again to get another daily report, which Gustav proceeded to cut out some information before explaining how he got to the current. The officers from the base were greatly shocked after hearing that Gustav already had a lead on Sahil and was planning how to meet up in 2 days. They had expected that it would take longer than this, but Gustav had once again surprised them. They came up with a good plan for Gustav to approach Sahil in the next 2 days. They had given Gustav information on the 2 men currently residing in the upper room where he was observing. Junior Commanders Folan and Dart were the henchmen of Commander Fabian. They still gave Gustav some more private information he needed to know about these 2. They had no idea that Gustav wasn't going to follow their plans since he already had his. His plans had a higher tendency of working out due to the hidden abilities that they didn't know he had. The communication ended some time later after Officer Gooseman commended Gustav's progress. Gustav later moved out of his room after checking the footage and headed straight for the teleportation elevator. He arrived at the last floor a few moments later. He had already changed his looks before he left his room, taking the form of a suave-looking 62 handsome young man dressed in expensive clothing. After arriving on the corridor of the last floor, he noticed a beautiful young lady dressed in a tight red mini gown, heading towards the direction of the teleportation elevator. Gustav's next move was to head for her. Excuse me, young miss, could I see you for a moment? Gustav said with a smooth tone as he arrived in front of her. She paused her footsteps and stared at him up and down with a look of satisfaction. Yes? How can I help you? She asked with a smile. Can you come with me? I just need a few moments of your time, Gustav said while winking at her and showing a charming smile. She returned the smile before responding, I think I can spare a few moments. He must be really loaded. I guess today is my lucky day. Twice in a row, she bit her lip while thinking before following by Gustav's side. A few minutes later, both of them were in Gustav's room, sitting on his bed. Gustav's room was only 2 floors lower, so even though it wasn't up to the standard of the ones on the last floor, it was also very luxurious. He had hidden anything that could cause suspicions. The lady, who seemed to still be looking around, kept asking Gustav different questions. Let's get down to business. Gustav finally spoke as he placed his hand on her face and turned it to face her. You haven't shown. Before she could speak, she suddenly felt a prick on the side of her neck. Her eyes turned hazy, and the next thing she knew, She blacked out as her head fell limply towards the back. Gustav's left hand was currently pressing on a particular part of her neck area, which she didn't spot because she had no idea when Gustav's hand traveled towards her neck. She had already started passing out before she felt the prick. Gustav released her body completely, letting her fall onto the bed with her back. Shall be out for nothing less than 24 hours. That's enough time to get done what I need to do, Gustav said with a low tone as he searched her body for items. After taking all that was on her being, his face transformed into hers, and he moved towards the mirror area to check it out. There won't be any issues with this except for applying makeup. Unlike hers, Gustav's transformed face was without any makeup, causing him to look a little different. Still, he didn't see this a problem. Gustav saw the communication device in the lattice storage device which was given to her by Junior Commander Dart, who was very interested in her and wanted her to come over again the next day. Yes, this lady happened to be one of them that visited the room of the two junior officers. Gustav had decided to mimic her identity and infiltrate their room when the day broke. All he needed to do now was work out his acting skills, use proper makeup, and dress sexily. This was the first time he would be trying to use the identity of a female, so he had to make sure it was fluid enough to avoid any form of suspicions. Hours later, the day broke, and Gustav put in all the necessary procedures before leaving their room around 11 a.m. Within a laboratory, Angie sat on an exalted medical stretcher in a thin medical fabric as rays of light scanned her entire body. A middle-aged-looking man with a few gray beards and a one-eye spectacle covering his left eye stood in front, observing the holographic monitor where her internal structure was displayed. Just what is this thing? He muttered with a contemplative look. I have cross-referenced its anatomy with every known parasite to exist, but it's like it doesn't exist, yet it does, he added. Angie, who was laying down, heard him muttering some of these words and voiced out, What's wrong, Dr. Levi? This is quite a dilemma, Angie. You're going to have to give me a list of everything you came into contact with in the last 4 months, he voiced out in response. Chapter 540. This is quite a dilemma, Angie. You're going to have to give me a list of everything you came into contact with in the last 4 months, he voiced out in response. In the last 4 months? It's impossible for me to recall everything I came into contact with in the last 4 days. Talk more of 4 months, Angie responded with a look of indignation. True. That was unreasonable of me to ask for. Not everyone is blessed with superintelligence and retentive memory like me, he said with a look of contemplation. Is he really flexing right now? Angie said internally with a tired glare. The problem with this thing is, if I use my removal method, there's a chance that your legs might never be operational again, since it has eaten deep into your legs' internal muscular build, Dr. Levi said while moving around with a disturbed look. They already missed it twice due to its ability to mimic the look of your cells. If you hadn't come to me directly for your third checkup, those screw-ups might never have found it, he added with a look of repression. Just as Dr. Levi had stated, Angie had already been here twice for checkups, but none of the scanners and monitors were able to notice anything wrong with her, so the doctors in charge of her checkups said nothing was wrong with her. They assumed it was just an allergic reaction to something she had eaten and would eventually stop. The painful attacks she had when waking up in the morning had been coming in more frequently lately, so she still came for checkups again. This time, she decided to meet Dr. Levi directly after remembering her last time here for bloodline strengthening with Gustav. This might also be a negative side effect to bloodline strengthening surgery you underwent months back. Although it's supposed to be 100% safe, complications are not completely unavoidable. Dr. Levi kept prancing around the place as he spoke. He turned around and moved close to the holographic monitor to study the weird parasite within Angie's body again. I'll need you to be coming every day for checkups until I find a way to deal with this, Dr. Levi said while typing a few things down. All right, Dr. Levi. Is there anything I should do in the meantime? Angie asked as she sat up. Just avoid using your speed too much. Use it moderately from now on, he instructed. My speed? But how would I train without that? Angie asked with a conflicted expression. You can, but use it moderately. Do not push yourself until I have found a way out of this predicament, Dr. Levi explained. It was quite a hard pill for Angie to swallow since she had decided to push herself to become very powerful before Gustav returned. But she had no choice but to nod in response as she stood to her feet. All right, she muttered with a defeated expression before leaving. Dr. Levi stood in the same spot for minutes, examining the reports from Angie's tests. This is really bad. If I don't find a way to get rid of this soon, she'll lose her bloodline. Dr. Levi mumbled underneath his breath with a worried look. The more she uses her speed, the more this thing saps away components from her bloodline. At the same time that was going on within camp, Gustav had already found himself in the room of the two junior commanders, Folin and Dart. He was currently dressed in a tight white dress, full-faced makeup with red cherry lips, long brown hair, exuding a seductive charisma. Of course, he had taken the form of the beautiful lady he called over to his room the other night, who went by the name Cassandra. He was currently seated on the bed beside one of them. Cassandra, you're looking sexier than even the night before, Junior Commander Dart stated as he trailed his finger up Gustav's right thigh. Gustav's trembled inwardly in disgust as he felt the fingers running up his thigh, and subconsciously reached out to grab his hand. Now, Dart. You know, I like having a little bit of fun before we go into the main deal, Gustav said with a seductive female tone as he gently caressed the hand and lifted it off his thighs. MHHMM, I totally enjoyed our fun yesterday. You're so much interesting than my boring wife, Junior Commander Dart responded with a sneaky-looking smile. Yes, I will make today even more fun, Gustav said while winking. He was glad he didn't lose composure, and inwardly thanked his stars that he was able to stop those hands from going any further. Looks like the universe wants you to get disvirgined one way or the other. The system suddenly voiced in his head with a burst of laughter. Gustav. You little. Gustav nearly cussed at the system again, but he calmed himself and breathed in. What do you have in mind? Junior Commander Dart asked. You'll have to follow me to find out, Gustav said while standing up and walking sensually towards the door. Junior Commander Dart stared at the backside of the beautiful female in front of him, which vibrated with every movement, going up and down. He nearly whistled as he stood to his feet with a delighted expression. Folin, I'll be back. I need to take care of something, he said while standing to his feet and following after Gustav. Have fun, Junior Commander Folin voiced out from across the room, where he was also busy with a beautiful and barely dressed lady. As they walked through the corridor, Junior Commander Dart caught up with Gustav and asked, Where are we going? To my apartment. I have some fun tools we can use to make things even more interesting, Gustav responded. Images appeared in Commander Dart's mind, causing him to look forward to this even more as they moved towards Gustav's apartment. A few minutes later, they arrived there, and Junior Commander Folin sat on the bed as he waited for Gustav to bring out the tools he mentioned. Chapter 541. While he waited, he suddenly felt a surge of energy from behind him. He turned around only to see a milky, glowing blade headed for him from behind. Shithayanin, a weird-looking, whitish, force field-like energy suddenly appeared around him, stopping the blade from penetrating for a few moments. Who are you? Just as he asked this question, he saw the arm holding onto the blade transform into a beastly muscular one, pushing the blade further in. Poochie! It stabbed through his chest in the next instant as his face shone confusion and disbelief. How? The force field should be powerful enough to stop the attack of a falcon ranked, unless His eyes widened even more as he coughed out blood and fell to the back. The force field disappeared completely along with Gustav's atomic blade, which disintegrated into light particles within Junior Commander Dart's chest. Gustav slowly moved towards him on the floor, while slowly shapeshifting back into the look he used upon entering the city. The commander was not dead yet. His eyes were still wide open as he stared at Gustav's transformation with utter shock and regret. A shapeshifter? They still exist? This was the last thought that appeared in his mind before another milky-colored blade came stabbing down to the left side of his chest. Poochie, his vision slowly faded as he coughed out another mouthful of blood. Gustav pulled the atomic disintegration blade out of him and turned around to go change out of his current clothes. He was still dressed in the tight white gown and couldn't hide how disgusted he felt at the moment. After changing back into a male's outfit, he moved towards the corner where he stabbed Junior Commander Dart. He had already breathed his last at this point and was covered in a pool of his own blood with wide-open eyes. "You're not the worst of them. You probably would have survived, but you were just unfortunate." Gustav didn't have any shred of pity in the tone of his voice as he squatted. He slowly took off the commander's clothes and moved them to the bathroom to get them washed. They'll have to find a way to mend these holes. This was the only problem at the moment, since he had torn holes through the clothes when he stabbed Junior Commander Dart twice. After thinking about it for a few moments, Gustav decided not to stress about it. It might even be better this way. It would be more believable if I mentioned to Folan that I had rough sex with this girl, which lead to the clothes turning out this way. Gustav thought, "Except you've never had sex. Talk more of having it rough." The system voiced, "Shut it," Gustav responded before moving out of the bathroom. He walked towards Junior Commander Dart's body and carried it towards the bathroom as well before dropping him in front of the bathtub. "Looks like it's time to finally test out this disintegration ability," Gustav said internally as he placed his palms together while staring at the empty bathtub in front. He closed his eyes for a few seconds before suddenly opening them again. A milky glow appeared in his eyes and his palms as he slowly separated them and stretched them towards the bathtub. Pool of disintegration has been activated. Estimated time, 1 hour, -1000. The bathtub suddenly started getting filled up with this milky-colored energy reaching the top in a matter of moments. Gustav's eyes returned back to normal after this, and he stared at the tub that had been filled with milky energy. He squatted and grabbed onto Junior Commander Dart's corpse before lifting it and throwing it into the tub. A sizzling sound rang out next as the body landed in the pool of milky energy as the smell of flesh being cooked drifted across the bathroom. Gustav turned around at this point and headed back to the main room. He arrived where the pool of blood was positioned and proceeded to snap his fingers, causing sprinkles of milky-colored light to fall onto the floor. Everywhere this light touched, the blood disintegrated into light particles. In a few moments, not even a single speck of blood could be seen on the floor. The floor was unaffected due to the lights disappearing before they made contact with it. They only made contact with the blood. Gustav proceeded to lay on his bed and sighed in relief as he closed his eyes. In the next 1 hour, he moved towards the bathroom area to check on the bathtub. The milky-colored pool had disappeared, along with the body of Junior Commander Dart. There was not even a single trace left, nothing to be seen at all. Looks like my calculations were right. It would take about that long to disintegrate the body of a mixed blood of that strength completely, Gustav thought before proceeding to take the clothes of the commander out of the washing machine as well. He proceeded to dress in shorts and a shirt in a few moments before moving towards the mirror area. His face and body slowly transformed as he stared at the mirror. In a few moments, his entire body features had become exactly like that of Commander Dart, with no difference to be spotted. The small beards and potbelly were also visible, along with the pair of sharp and mean eyes. Gustav went on to a part of his room that branched off into another. This was where he had kept the lady, Cassandra. He reached out to her unconscious body and brought her back to his main room to clothe her and return all her things back to her possession. A few minutes later, he placed her to lay on the bed before leaving through the door. She'll find her way out when she comes to, Gustav thought as he headed towards the teleportation elevator. Now it's time to play Dart, Gustav said internally as he headed towards the last floor. Chapter 542. Now it's time to play Dart, Gustav said internally as he headed towards the last floor. Gustav moved towards the room Junior Commanders Dart and Folan were residing in and brought out the keycard before accessing the room. At this time, Junior Commander Folan, too, had just finished having fun with the lady that was with him when Dart left the other time. The lady was just leaving as Gustav arrived. Junior Commander Folan displayed a huge grin on his face as he nodded at Gustav. Gustav returned the grin as Junior Commander Dart would. "How did yours go?" Junior Commander Folan asked from up ahead. "As you can see, it was intense," Gustav said with a wider grin while gesturing at the holes on his shirt. "Oh, it seems she handled you pretty well," Junior Commander Folan responded with an understanding look. "Haha, she did. I was able to do it in ways I couldn't do it with my wife," Gustav added while proceeding towards the sofa by the side to sit. "Cheers, man," Junior Commander Folan responded while handing Gustav a drink. Gustav responded by receiving it and taking a sip before asking, "What about you?" "This one is not quite bad, too." Both of them began to share experiences as Junior Commander Folan narrated most of the time. They ended up discussing for the next 2 hours. From this, Gustav understood more about the character he was pretending to be, as well as Junior Commander Folan too. Later during the day, Junior Commander Folan received a call from the region base and had to leave to get some things sorted out personally. Gustav was happy to stay behind and let him go handle what he wanted to because he planned to look around the place anyways. After Junior Commander, he moved towards the small diamond-shaped pinky object placed on the table in front. Gustav could tell that this was a spatial storage device by sensing the energy waves coming from it. It was similar to the button underneath his collar, which happened to be his storage device, but this one seemed to be more sophisticated and secure. It definitely wouldn't open up if the owner wasn't the one in its possession. Those who were professional storage devices hackers would not be able to open this one without causing the spatial store in it to collapse, damaging all the items within. Gustav grabbed hold of it to inspect, and to his surprise, he instantly gained access to the things within as a holographic panel appeared in front of him. "Looks like Dart is the one with access to this," Gustav muttered as he checked the holographic table in front of him, which displayed everything within. "Wow." Dart was loaded. Gustav couldn't help but exclaim as he noticed the expensive-looking jewelry being displayed. The storage space within this device was as big as an entire living room in a luxurious household, which was 3 times the size of Gustav's. Gustav's storage device was nearly filled up due to the things he always brought along with him, but it wasn't even close to all the things kept within this one. Diamond-shaped objects, gold bars, and some other mineral resources stacked together would rival even the most secure storage vaults of banks where their most valuable items were stored. No officer is supposed to be this rich. Gustav was dumbfounded, but after piecing things together, he wasn't so shocked. The whole civil war started with these groups in power disagreeing over the authority of the world government. The misuse of resources and the economical state of the city wasn't so good as well since the world government started to increase its authority in the city. These groups on the side of the world government were trying to push the other groups out of power, which was what started the Civil War. A whole lot of natives from the city were on the side of the other groups who were trying to stop the world government authority from expanding within the city, but this was proving difficult due to the groups on their side. It just so happened that the Zalabans were amongst those supporting the world government, and now seeing what Dart had in his storage device gave Gustav a stronger grasp of the situation. What's that?" Gustav wondered out loud as he noticed a part of the storage device where a document was kept. seeing as this slot only contained this document, as well as a small shiny mineral placed beside it. Gustav's curiosity was piqued. He proceeded to pull this one out of the storage device. Zing, a flash of blue light appeared, and within it was the documents and the weird-looking stone. Gustav decided to check out the documents first, and his face lit up with a look of interest as he read through the contents. So, this is what they planned to offer Sahil. Gustav muttered as he scanned through them. Isn't this a bit too much? Maybe they're planning to backstab him later in the future after this whole thing is blown over. Gustav kept speaking as he flipped through the pages. Oh, according to this they can't. Looks like this is legit, Gustav mumbled after arriving at the last page and dropped the documents. He proceeded to grab hold of the stone. This stone happens to be among the items offered, he muttered while inspecting it. Gustav couldn't find anything out of the ordinary with the weird, grayish-colored stone, but decided to make use of God Eyes to see through it. God Eyes has been activated. His pupils turned green and crimson with gold on the outer covering as the world around him also transformed, becoming see-through. Gustav had a look of confusion as he stared at the stone. He couldn't see through it. He strengthened his gaze and stared at it even more intensely than before. However, besides a weird, foggy-looking green smoke oozing from it, he couldn't see anything else. Chapter 543. He could only see this weird, foggy-looking thing when staring at the stone using God Eyes, but he couldn't see it after deactivation. Gustav deactivated God Eyes for the third time after not still being able to see through the stone and placed it back on the table. Do you know what this thing is? He asked the system internally, scanning components now. The system responded as bright reddish rays of light shot out of Gustav's pupils. After a few seconds, the rays of light shooting out of Gustav's eyes formed a holographic projection that started computing information on this stone. Void stone? Gustav saw the name appear along with several images of this stone taken in different places worldwide. One of the rarest materials in the world necessary for building the most powerful technological devices in the world. Gustav kept reading the list information internally. So rare that it had been deemed illegal for sale by the world government, so other organizations are not able to lay hold of it besides those under the world government. If found in any part of the world by mistake, one is expected to report to the nearby authorities for them to have it taken away. Could lead to a life sentence if found in possession of. Blah, blah, blah. I want to know what exactly this does. Gustav decided to skip most of the information that emphasized how rare this material was. Supposedly one of the most important materials responsible for the creation of the item given by the Slarkovs to the human race thousands of years back as a gift. This was the last thing Gustav read at the end of the list of information. There was still no detailed explanation of what exactly this stone did, or how to use it, which made Gustav feel baffled. But at least now he understood that this was a precious item that couldn't even be purchased with money. Recalling that Sahil was not just an advanced arms dealer, but also a technologist working under someone. They both shared a history of crime. So Gustav understood this was likely an item they would want to lay their hands on, but are unable to do to the whole situation regarding the Void Stone. Now that they would hand over something that not even money could help them lay hold of, Sahil would definitely agree to their demands. Gustav felt this whole situation might lead to something bigger and worse in the future if Sahil managed to lay his hands on this. On the bright side, he could get close to Sahil and place the tracking device on him, now using Junior Commander Dart's identity. This would be mission success for him, but from the information he had gotten on Sahil, who happened to be a master in the art of escaping, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't notice the tracker before leaving this place. So even if it ended up being a successful mission, all his work might end up going to waste at this point. If Sahil got all this and still managed to escape after everything, who knew what he would build next? It might even rival the most dangerous weapons or devices currently in the world government possession. At this point, Gustav made the decision. "I'll catch him myself," he muttered underneath his breath with a strong gaze. "Seems like a plausible decision, but you have to be extremely careful. What do you have in mind?" The system supported Gustav's decision, but wanted to ensure he came up with a good plan to manage this. It won't be immediate, since people from both sides will be around. Everyone will be on guard during the meetup. "I'll still have to place the tracker on him first," Gustav said internally with a contemplative expression. "How do you intend to place the tracker on him?" The system asked. "In the one with the documents and the stone, which means I'll also be the one handing it over," Gustav responded with a smirk. Hours later, Gustav was laying on Commander Dart's bed, pretending to be asleep while Junior Commander Fabian was on the other king-sized bed by the side. Junior Commander Fabian arrived about an hour earlier. He brought Gustav to speed on the things that had gone down so far, and the reports they were getting from outside Region 32. Both sides had received a lot of casualties, but according to Junior Commander Fabian, their side happened to have inflicted more damage, and the higher-ups were starting to plan an operation to eliminate the higher-ups of the other side. Lucius was mentioned to have gone missing on an assignment. Still, the way Junior Commander Fabian mentioned him, he was discarding any kind of insinuation that Lucius was in trouble. According to him, there was no way anyone would be able to handle Lucius, so he was probably deep in the enemy base sabotaging them at the moment. If only he knew that Lucius had already been sent to the afterlife by Gustav. Gustav had already finished making plans for catching Sahil, but at the moment he wanted to regain his energy, since keeping shape-shifting activated for a long period burned a lot of bloodline energy. He was currently hiding under the duvet after shape-shifting back to his original look while pretending to be asleep. Junior Commander Folan still wanted to have fun this night, so he invited some girls over. They were all chilling at the pool area so as not to disturb Gustav in the room. There was still another day to go before Sahil reached out to them with the location. Just like that, another night went by, and today was the 6th day of Gustav getting to the city. Back in camp, it had already been a week since he left. Unbeknownst to him, the others were already missing his presence and would occasionally glance at his door area whenever they passed. This included even Endrick, who would get all sentimental the moment he passed by. "I hope we can form a bond one day like we had when I was very little." This thought appeared in Endrick's mind as he passed by Gustav's door again. However, he suddenly recalled something. How do I deal with Angie's situation? Chapter 544. However, he suddenly recalled something. How do I deal with Angie's situation? He remembered injecting something given to him, sent to him, by young Joe into Angie when he met her in a secluded environment. Angie felt the prick, but she thought it was an attack due to the syringe not being visible. He had no idea what the contents of the syringe were, but he knew it was nothing good. And since he was after dealing with Gustav at that time, he didn't care if she would be harmed. Now, it was an entirely different case, and he didn't know if she was okay or not. So far, he didn't see any traces or signs that something was wrong with her. Endrick didn't want this to be another reason for him and Gustav to battle again, so he decided he would look into it. He couldn't just go back to contacting young Joe because he had said everything he knew about the whole past scenario and pointed out those he could. Right now, he had no means of contacting young Joe, and even if he did, he wouldn't want to because this just opened him up for another round of manipulation. He walked away after deciding to watch over her for any signs and ask her later if anything was up with her. So far, even though they weren't really on speaking terms, they were no longer hostile to each other as well. Within Region 32 in Lilac City, Gustav spent the entire day moving around with Junior Commander Folan. They had to check out different parts of the region for any possible spy movements to ensure no plans to sabotage them or anything the next day. This region was being controlled by two groups, but there was the possibility of infiltration from the enemy groups with the intention of causing sabotage. All in all, they were just being cautious. Gustav used this to mark out several spots and make escape routes in his mind if anything went wrong in his personal plans. They later returned back to their room in El Caso's place. They moved to the pub area to get some drinks with the regional leader who happened to be accompanying them. They talked and had fun for the rest of the evening. Region Leader Khan asked to see what the offer to Sahil entails. Still, Junior Commander Folan had to shut him down there, saying it wasn't to be disclosed in public places. They would have to wait till the next morning to contact them with the location for them to meet. It was only at the defining moment that he would find out. Region Leader Khan saw both junior commanders exchange glances and understood. Late at night, both of them returned to their room while Region Leader Khan left, saying he had some personal issues to attend to. Gustav could hear during his communication with someone using a communication tool that they were looking for a missing person. His mind flashed to a particular person when he heard this part of the conversation, but he wasn't really bothered. It would still take some time before anyone could catch on to anything that had happened relating to his manslaughter on the first day he arrived here. The night went by just like that, and another day arrived. The day before, Gustav had to excuse himself for about 2 hours to complete his daily tasks. He was lucky June, or Commander Folan, didn't suspect anything except for the fact that he had been sleeping without snoring recently, which he made fun of. Gustav was hoping he would get the chance to take care of his daily tasks today. This would only be possible if everything went as planned. Around 6 a.m. in the morning, their communication device rang, and Junior Commander Folan proceeded to answer it. As expected, it was from Sahil, who proceeded to give them a location to meet within 10 minutes. He mentioned that if they were even a second late, he would be gone. The skies were still dark at this time, but Gustav and Junior Commander Folan had been expecting this, so they had been awake for a long time. Junction 23rd, the main center. Junior Commander Folan spoke through the communication device to Region Leader Khan. Region Leader Khan gathered a group of 5 to meet with both of them at the location mentioned. Gustav and Junior Commander Folan quickly moved towards the location mentioned that happened to be located somewhere around the edge of Region 32. A ride was already waiting for them outside, so it took no more than 6 minutes to arrive there, leaving them with about 4 more minutes left. They arrived at a 5-story structure that looked like a medical facility. Sahil contacted them again upon their arrival and directed them on where to head to. Region Leader Khan and 4 Taliban officers dressed in full black followed them from behind as they moved around the place, going from corridors to corridors. They arrived at a particular place that led to a dead end where only a wall could be seen. "There's nothing here," Junior Commander Folan voiced towards the communication device. "Keep going," Sahil responded from the other end. The workers in the vicinity even told them this place led to a dead end, but they had to follow Sahil's instructions. "I sense a spatial and gravitational energy," Gustav voiced out as they approached the wall. "I don't sense anything." Junior Commander Folan had a look of confusion on his face, just as they were only 6 feet away from the wall. Zing! Everyone got teleported away. Gustav only saw everywhere turn white for an instant, and the next thing they knew, they were in the underground section of a party-ruined building. Only the holes above and on the walls provided a source of light. The vicinity looked quite dead, and up ahead, a man wearing shades with a scarf covering his face could be seen standing in place. Chapter 545. Behind him was a group of 7 dressed in red jackets, all armed with dangerous-looking weapons. "Dash, where are we? Dash, what's going on?" The guards following them turned around to touch the wall and realized they couldn't go back. "Welcome, my friends," he voiced out as the outline of a smile could be seen on the scarf covering his face. "Slick SL. Good to finally meet you, Junior Commander Folan voiced out along with Gustav, who also retained his composed form and greeted as well. They all shook hands with him, Region Leader Khan included. Zing, 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 several chairs, and a table appeared in their front, and Sahil gestured at them to take a seat. Sahil sat about 10 feet away, leaving sufficient distance between himself and the Zalabans, but a table was positioned in their midst. Where is this that you have brought us to? Region Leader Khan asked with an intrigued look. That's not important. Let's get down to business first. Getting back to the region won't be a problem if you lots didn't set any traps for me, Sahil responded, still with a smile. Gustav and Junior Commander Folan stared at each other for a moment before nodding. Gustav proceeded to bring out the diamond-like storage device that belonged to Junior Commander Dart. He sorted through the belongings and brought out the documents first before standing to his feet. The men behind pointed their weapons at him, causing him to pause his movements. One of them moved forward and took the documents from Gustav's grasp before handing them over to Sahil themselves after opening it and scanning through its contents. Sahil nodded in satisfaction as he received the documents and started flipping through the pages one after the other. He slowly read through the contents, and even though it was hard to read his expressions due to his face being covered with a scarf, Gustav could see the excitement in his eyes. After a few more minutes, he finished flipping through the pages completely and raised his head to stare at them. "Is this true?" he inquired with an excited tone. Every word written, as you can see, is backed up with signatures from the higher-ups, Junior Commander Folan responded. "Wonderful. Where is the item?" he asked again. Gustav raised his hand to show the void stone which was on his palm. Before any of the men behind could move forward, Sahil stood to his feet and moved towards Gustav to grab the stone himself. The instant he grabbed the stone from Gustav's hand, an invisible spider positioned on the top of the stone instantly burrowed into his hand unbeknownst to him. He didn't feel anything as this unknown thing invaded his body. He inspected the stone with a delighted expression while moving back to his seating area. Gustav smirked internally, tracking device successfully planted. Sahil was still looking excited as he brought a device out of the blue and scanned the stone. The outline of a grand smile appeared on his face underneath the scarf as he voiced out, "It's genuine. The Void Stone." Did he just say the Void Stone? Region Leader Khan was shocked as he stared at the grayish-colored stone in Sahil's grasp. The others behind were just as surprised seeing Sahil being given this unpurchasable item. "Of course it is Slick SL. Now, do you accept our offer?" Junior Commander Folan said with a smile. Definitely, I agree with this," Sahil responded as he grabbed hold of the documents again. Back at the base in Ruhagi City, a beeping sound could be heard within the main tent as all 4 officers gathered around the main monitor. "Oh my goodness, the young lad did it," Officer Guzman said with a surprised look. "He managed to place the tracking device on Sahil? It has only been 6 days. Officer Millie Brown voiced out with a tone of disbelief. Officer Tron and Lewis also stood by the side with looks of surprise, as well seeing the tracking device go online. But didn't he say he was in Region 32? How does the tracking device show Region 27? Officer Millie asked. Yeah, he did say that. Maybe he changed locations, Officer Lewis responded. He still hasn't reported in, and it's been 2 days. This is probably why, Officer Tron added. The most important part is he has completed the mission. With such speed too magnificent, Officer Guzman said with a delighted tone. They now realized that they had truly looked down on Gustav, and he wasn't like the other cadets. The next step now is withdrawal. We will need to contact him for that, Officer Guzman added. Back in the underground structure, both parties were still conversing on a few things. If I had found any secret, hidden communication device on any of you, I would have assumed this was a ploy, but now I don't have any worries, Sahil stated as he stood to his feet. Inwardly, Gustav thanked his stars that he left the communication device he had been using to contact the base back in his room. When they got here, Sahil had already scanned everyone using one of his advanced technology devices. If anyone had a hidden communication device that was functioning at that moment, he would be alerted. The communication device Gustav used to communicate the base was always functional. Now that everything seems legit, I can transfer this to my boss, Sahil voiced out as he turned around and moved backward. His words caused their faces to lit up with confusion as they stared at Sahil's actions. To their surprise, he approached the person standing in the midst of these 7 people dressed in a red jacket and knelt. Just like the others, he was also holding a weapon and wearing a mask. He didn't seem any different from a mere lackey. Yet Sahil was kneeling in front of him. While they were staring with confused looks, this person removed the mask covering his face, and the looks that were revealed underneath were that of Sahil. "Good job," this man said before collecting the documents from the one kneeling. The one kneeling stood to his feet and also took off the scarf wrapped around his face, revealing a slightly different look. Chapter 546. "Good job," this man said before collecting the documents from the one kneeling. The one kneeling stood to his feet and took off the scarf wrapped around his face, revealing a slightly different look. Both of them looked quite similar, but the one that had been speaking to them all this time with a scarf covering his face had a 3-inch scar on his chin area. The moment the Zalabans noticed the two, they were instantly able to tell that the one they had been negotiating with all this time wasn't the real Sahil. The real Sahil had been standing behind all this while pretending to be a lackey, while this look-alike handled everything so far. "What is going on her slick SL?" Junior Commander Folan voiced out from behind with a confused expression, just like everyone. "My friends, I apologize for the confusion." The Sahil dressed in red jacket handed the weapon in his grasp over to his lackey and started walking forward. "This man here is Jabal, my look-alike," he said while pointing at the fake Sahil. He approached the chair and took a seat in front before crossing his leg with a smile of satisfaction etched on his face as he noticed their expressions. "You see, I take a lot of precautions to keep myself secure. My look-alike handled everything so far to prevent any form of trap or ploy that may have been aimed at me. Jabal is my insurance. He is trained and ready to die in my place just in case any hazardous ploy had been orchestrated. I apologize once again for the lack of trust, but I've been in this business for many years. It's hard to trust anyone, even my business partners," the real Sahil said with a half-apologetic and half-prideful gaze. "It's all right, we completely understand. Now that you can see that no trap was set, will you sign the documents?" Junior Commander Folan went straight back to business after understanding the situation. Although he and the others felt this was way too much precaution taken, it was understandable when they tried putting themselves in his shoes. "Yes, I will sign them now. I will not say, this is not a deal, even if I am drunk," Sahil responded with a peal of light laughter before he started sorting through the documents. Only Gustav knew just how smart this whole setup Sahil planned was. "The tracker is in the wrong person," Gustav voiced inwardly. He now understood what they meant by saying Sahil was very slippery to catch. They were all fooled from the start, thinking they were negotiating with the real Sahil. It had been set up so well. The voice and the facial description all matched the images, so no one could tell that it wasn't him, even though he was using a scarf to cover part of his face. The problem now was the look-alike would not always move with Sahil. According to what Gustav had read about Sahil, he mostly moved alone, except when he was delivering merchandise or needed protection for negotiations like this. His travels from place to place were always alone, along with his hideout. He was always by himself, and even his subordinates could not tell his location. This was all backed up by facts because the MBO had caught a lot of his subordinates who wouldn't be able to tell of his location even though they were directly working under him. The moment this negotiation was over, Sahil would obviously disappear again by himself, while this look-alike would most likely be sent to another location. Back at the base, they already saw this as a completed mission, not knowing that they'd be going after the wrong person. Here you go. Sahil raised the documents after signing them, and one of his henchmen moved over to pass it to Junior Commander Folan. Junior Commander Folan sat in place and scanned through the documents and, after a while, nodded. With this, we have a successful negotiation. Junior Commander Folan voiced out with a smile and stood to his feet. Gustav also stood to his feet at this point with Region Leader Khan, and they moved closer to him. May our partnership last long. With this, you don't have to worry about the other side receiving any merchandise from me. The Zalabans will be responsible for winning the war, Sahil said as he proceeded to shake Junior Commander Folan. Gustav also moved forward and shook his hand as well, retaining his normal composure with a smile. He stared into Sahil's eyes for a moment. "You'll have to use it," Gustav said inwardly as he ended the handshake. "You have to be careful. It would be suspicious if anyone saw you. The system warned internally. I don't have a choice here. This is the only way," he responded while moving towards the side. "Just make sure to look around you properly. No one must see you using it," the system voiced internally. Region Leader Khan also shook hands with Sahil as well, and both sides prepared to leave, to show my enthusiasm. "Daryl," Sahil called out to one of his henchmen and held out his hand. The henchman moved forward with a blue ring in his grasp and placed it on Sahil's palm. Sahil tapped the ring, which emitted a projection displaying stacks of boxes where weapons and other different kinds of technological materials were kept. "This is enough advance supply for 100 troops. I'm giving this for free," Sahil said before handing the ring over to Junior Commander Folan, who then handed it to Gustav. Junior Commander Dart was always the one handling things like this, so it was normal he gave it to him. Gustav wore the ring on his finger to ensure its safety as they thanked Sahil for his generosity. "This was a great meeting. Whenever you need items, you can just consult Jabal over here like you've been doing before. Everything will be sorted out by him," Sahil stated. Junior Commander Folan nodded in understanding before asking, "How do we leave?" He looked around, not seeing any exit. "The same way you came. The gateway is activated now," Sahil said before turning around. Chapter 547. "I have to go deal with something too," he added while turning around to head towards where his henchmen were stationed. Meanwhile, the Zalabans turned around to leave, moving towards the wall area where they had appeared on their arrival here. While Gustav was moving forward along with them, he positioned himself at the very edge and looked down. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes turned scarlet and green with a hint of gold surrounding the irises. Gustav suddenly turned his head to the side to stare backward. His sight zoomed in on Sahil, who was walking away with his back facing them. Life signs identification is operational. His sight zoomed in on his head area with speed seeing through it and spotting a shape on his forehead area. Saving life sign. Life sign has been saved successfully. The instant this notification appeared in his line of sight, Gustav closed his eyes instantly and turned to look forward. All this was done in 3 seconds. God Eyes has been deactivated. Upon opening his eyes, they had returned to normal. Just as they reached the wall area, a loud shout was heard from behind. "Hold it!" This voice was similar to that of Sahil. Still, Gustav could instantly tell that it was the look-alike, Jabal. Even though there was only a slight difference, the Zalabans paused their steps and turned around with looks of confusion. "What is it?" Region Leader Khan questioned. "What did you do?" he asked while moving forward. Sahil was also alerted at this point and turned around to see what was happening behind him. What are you talking about? Junior Commander Folan asked. I saw you look backwards a while back with red eyes, and now your eyes have returned to normal. I sensed a weird energy from that direction, which was why I was able to spot you just before you closed your eyes and looked forward, Jabal voiced out. Gustav was frozen internally as he heard that. How did he sense the power of God eyes? Even though he was startled, he still retained his composure. Red eyes? No one has an ability that triggers residential eyes in our midst. Region Leader Khan, do you? Junior Commander Folan voiced out. No, I don't. There must be a misunderstanding. Region Leader Khan responded. I saw him. If he didn't do anything, why did he look back? And why did I sense that weird energy? Jabal stated, while pointing in Gustav's direction. There must be some sort of mistake. Haha, Junior Commander Dart doesn't have such abilities. Junior Commander Folan laughed lightly while staring at Gustav at the side. Hold on. Jabal never lies. He doesn't have a reason to, since he'll soon be dead, one of these days anyways. He's the 6th of his kind already, Sahil said while walking forward. Also, he is keen to sensing energy, no matter how hidden. So long as an energy emitted, it's like a beacon to him. This is also one of the ways he's able to protect himself from danger. Sahil arrived a few feet in front of the Zalabans after saying this and stared at Gustav. If I did something, there should be some kind of proof then. I don't see anyone getting blown up or dying from anything. Gustav finally spoke. Then why did your eyes emit such weird energy? And why does your partner not believe you have an ability that triggers your eye color to change? Jabal asked in quick succession as the suspicious look on his face increased. Knowing that Sahil trusted his lookalike very much, and everything he stated so far seemed logical, he figured he had to choose his next words wisely. He couldn't lie about his eyes changing color. My partner does not know if it, because it's a new ability that I obtained recently, and I was just testing it out. Gustav spoke with a straight face void of any distress. You gain a new ability? Junior Commander Folan couldn't hide his surprise as he voiced out. H&M, Gustav nodded at Folan, not knowing that at this point, Folan had started to question this whole scenario. And why do you feel the need to test it out on my subordinates? You gazed in our direction with this, if I'm correct? Sahil questioned with a suspicious look as well. I can use it to determine power levels. I was curious to see what the power levels of your subordinates were, Gustav said as he activated God Eyes one more time, causing his eye color to change. Everyone was able to see his eyes clearly at this point. If I had done anything harmful, I'm sure it would be taking effect by now. Is anyone feeling strange? Gustav stated while donning a look of ridicule. When did eye color change become a thing of alarm? Gustav added, faking an expression of annoyance. This is highly disrespectful towards my partner. We just concluded a successful negotiation. Mr. Slick, don't let your unfound insecurities ruin our present relationship. Junior Commander Folan spoke up as well after deciding he would question Gustav about the ability later. Region Leader Khan nodded in support as well. While I do apologize for this, I take everything seriously, my friends. It is why I have managed to stay alive for this long, Sahil said with an apologetic look before turning to stare at Gustav again. Do you mind identifying the bloodline rank of every one of my subordinates? He questioned. Junior Commander Folan and Region Leader Khan were about to speak again, but Gustav raised his hand to stop them. I have no issues with that, so long as after this you throw no further suspicions at me, Gustav stated while Sahil nodded in response. Gustav went ahead to mention the bloodline rank of all 7 people in a red jacket, and even included the power level of Jabal as well. Sahil nodded with a smile on his face. Well done. You have mentioned all this correctly. The Zalabans had looks of relief as they heard this. Junior Commander Folan was about to say something, but Sahil cut him short. Just one more thing. Sahil stated while bringing out a triangular piece of equipment. Chapter 548. Just one more thing. Sahil stated while bringing out a triangular piece of equipment. What are you playing at again, Mr. Slick? You have to stop this if you don't want to ruin our newfound relationship, Junior Commander Folan voiced out, once again with a tone of annoyance. Relax, my friend. Don't worry, this is just a device for examining my crew, Sahil explained before turning around, and started heading towards the gang of 6 behind. I just need you all to hold on for a few seconds. Don't worry, I am no longer asking any questions or pointing fingers, Sahil added before arriving in front of the 7. The group from the Zalabans stared at Sahil's actions with confused looks. Gustav was suddenly feeling a sense of crisis as he stood in place. We just agreed that there will be no more suspicions after the previous question. We should be taking our leave now, Gustav voiced out. You're right, Junior Commander Dart, but how about we just give him a few seconds to complete his examination, Region Leader Khan stated. Him examining his crew doesn't affect us in any way, so we can tolerate this, Junior Commander Folan added, as well, deciding to just watch. Gustav had no choice but to keep quiet at this point, so as not to arouse any more suspicions. Sahil tapped the weird triangular device in his hand, and it shot out some blue rays that scanned all 6 of them at once. Their bodies were shown with translucent light, displaying their internal structure as well. The device kept making weird scanning noises for a few seconds before showing a green light. Sahil nodded at this and turned around with a smile before moving back towards the position of the Zalabans. I apologize for the inconveniences, my friends. I am finished with examining the state of my crew bodies, he voiced out as he arrived in front of them. Just as Junior Commander Folan was about to respond to that, Jabal interrupted. Boss, you haven't checked me, he said respectfully. Oh, yes, that's true, Sahil said before turning to face him with a light chuckle. One moment, he said to Junior Commander Folan before tapping the device again. It shot out the same rays as before scanning Jabal. At this point, the crisis Gustav felt in his mind was pushed to a whole new level. What exactly does that device do? Gustav asked the system internally, hoping it wasn't what he thought it was. How strong is the camouflaging power of the tracker? The system responded with a question of her own, one of the most powerful in the world. It hides within the blood vessels and mimics that part of the body, Gustav responded. If that is the case, there should be no problems unless this device has the Ultai stone as part of its build, the system stated. What's the Ultai stone? Just as Gustav was asking this, the device finished scanning as well. Beep, 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 beep. Beeping sounds suddenly started to reverberate across the place. Everyone stared at the device, and then at Jabal, whose body was still shining a translucent light. His left wrist area had a red light position in a part of it. Tracking device spotted. The voice of an AI rang out at this point, causing everyone's eyes to widen with shock. Gustav began to circulate his bloodline as this voice rang out, shit. How does this guy have everything? The 6 behind instantly raised their weapons and pointed them towards the Zalabans. So this was your plan? You lots wanted to track my movement? Sahil voiced out as he turned to face Gustav specifically. The Zalabans' troops behind also pointed their weapons forward at Sahil's crew, ready to exchange fire as well. We know nothing about this. You can't just assume that we're responsible, Junior Commander Folan voiced out. He is responsible. He is the only one who Sahil made physical contact with from the beginning. Is this something the Zalabans planned together, or is it a solo act? Sahil questioned. As Junior Commander Folan heard this, different thoughts suddenly started appearing in his mind as he turned to the side to stare at Gustav. Red eyes, no snoring for the past 2 days. No having fun with any girls like we planned before, except for our first day of arrival. completely sleeping underneath the duvet without messing up the covers before the next morning without pulling face from underneath during the entire night. Junior Commander Folan's eyes widened as he analyzed all this and stared at Gustav. "Who are you?" he voiced out. At this point, everyone knew there was something up with Gustav as Junior Commander Folan voiced that out. "Now, let's all calm down. There is no proof that this was done by me," Gustav spoke, still trying to salvage the situation. "He definitely planted it." Jabal voiced out as everyone began to surround Gustav. "I don't think this man is a part of us, Mr. Slick. I promise the Zalabans is not behind this. I just realized the numerous ways in which he's different from my partner," Junior Commander Folan stated as he began to channel his bloodline. "My trust in you lots have completely dwindled. Take him down," Sahel commanded, causing everyone to start firing at Gustav. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, Gustav knew there was no salvaging the situation. Sprint has been activated. Every single beam and projectile being shot towards him suddenly slowed down as he turned to the side to face Sahel's direction. "If I can grab onto him," Gustav said internally as he dashed forward, right before everyone's eyes. Gustav sped forward like a phantom, causing all the blasts to slam into the wall behind, which in turn teleported the blast to another location. Just as Gustav was about to touch Sahel, his body turned illusionary as he faded away. Sahel appeared about 100 feet behind. The Zalabans had confused faces at this point, as they spotted Gustav in front. "What speed? That's not Junior Commander Dart. Attack the imposter." Junior Commander Folan voiced out, causing everyone to dash forward as well. Sahel watched from the other end, too, with a look of understanding as he commanded his crew to also deal with Gustav. Chapter 549. Gustav swerved towards the side and dashed across the place, trying to dodge different kinds of attacks. "He's pretty fast, but outmanned," Sahel said with a smile, just as one of the red jackets threw his jacket away, revealing a pair of cannon-like arms. Another one transformed into a yellow beam of light and held up a rifle-like weapon that started getting charged with the yellow light before firing forward. "Thuam, time to go." Sahel stared at the void stone in his hands with a satisfied smile as his body started turning illusionary once again before disappearing completely. A loud bang reverberated across the place as the yellow beam traveled forward, packing immense force with it. Swayai, Gustav bent backward, causing it to pass above him, as his clothes flapped intensely and his hair blew backward from the generated wind. Two of the Zalaban troops, trying to attack him from behind, got blasted into smithereens as it collided with them. It tore straight through their bodies' wind, causing their arms and legs to get blasted towards different parts of the environment, while the beam kept traveling forward till blasted a massive hole in the wall by the side. Before Gustav could raise his body up, one of the red jackets with cannon-like arms was already descending upon him from above. Being unable to dodge in his current position, Gustav pushed himself upwards and threw a fist as he ascended. Bang! Both forces collided, causing a blast to resound in the vicinity as a purplish force radiating with immense energy swept across the vicinity the instant the collision was made. Gustav's body shot backward along with the other person. Two more red jackets were flanking him from the sides with their attacks as his body was still catapulting through the air. He did a flip in midair and slammed his hand on the ground, causing his body to ascend upwards as he dodged the projectiles. However, just as he ascended, two of the red jackets were already aiming for him. He spun in midair, dodging one attack, but the other, who had already leaped up, swung his foot towards Gustav's body. Gustav was only able to react by raising his hand in front of his chest in an X format to block the attack. Bang! The leg, which was laced with a rocket booster, slammed into his arms, causing Gustav to be blasted about 100 feet backward, headed for the ground. As Gustav's body was headed for the ground, Junior Commander Folan suddenly appeared behind him with his palm shooting forward. A star-colored beam could be seen on his palm as it traveled across the air, making sizzling sounds. While Gustav was spinning his body around to deal with this, the red jacket brimming with yellow light shot out another beam towards him, while the other one with cannon arms was also approaching from the side. Dodging all these at the same time would be impossible, since all of them were on the same strength level, or a little higher than Gustav. At this point, Gustav closed his eyes for a moment. It was as if all the actions in the world had paused just before he opened his eyes. A pinkish flame had appeared within them. A massive ray of pinkish energy suddenly blasted forth from his body, covering the entire vicinity in a matter of moments. Everyone instantly fell to their feet as Gustav spun in midair with a milky-colored blade in his arm. Swish, he swung the blade towards the yellowish beam, causing it to get slashed in half, but he was still pushed backward by the force, as both halves of the beam passed by his side and slammed into the ground behind. Boom! A massive explosion rang out as Junior Commander Folan, who happened to have fallen to his knees behind Gustav, got blasted across the place with his left arm completely disintegrated. He couldn't scream as he had lost control of his body, but the visible look of pain could be seen in his eyes as his body slammed to the ground hundreds of feet away and remained stationary. This time Gustav released his Yarki fully because most of them had power levels higher than him, and he didn't really have the time to restrain it like he used to do to being put in a very difficult position. The entire street outside had been covered up by the pinkish energy, and everyone was within it were falling to their knees. Within the underground structure, the Zalabins and the Red Jackets, every single person was on their knees with looks of fear on their faces as they stared in Gustav's direction. Gustav breathed in deeply before breathing out, causing the Yarki to start reducing in size. At this point, he had caused a scare across the entire street. He stared at the 10 people around him on their knees, and the 2 corpses blasted nearly to pieces by the sides. They were trying as much as possible to regain control of their bodies, but it was futile. Gustav turned around and dashed towards the wall on the far end. Swoosh! His body blasted through the wall as he arrived underneath a pile of rubble and more destroyed building parts. Thump! He leaped upwards, blasting through the covering of rubble, and appeared in the air above the half-decimated streets. While his body traveled across the air, he spread out his perception, trying to sense if Sahil was still in the vicinity, but just as he had expected, Sahil had completely disappeared. All he could see from above were citizens running from place to place with visible looks of fear on their faces, as they spotted his body cutting across the air like a streak. He landed on a building far ahead and continued dashing forward as he tapped the spatial bracelet on his wrist. Location: Region 32, El Caso's place, tapping on the save coordinates. A bright flash of light appeared around him as he leaped into the air again and disappeared. Zing! Chapter 550, Tapping on the Saved Coordinates. A bright flash of light appeared around him as he leaped into the air again and disappeared in midair. Zing! The instant Gustav disappeared, the Zalabins and Red Jackets within the underground structure regained control of their bodies. As they stood to their feet, they looked around the vicinity with fear in their eyes, still wondering what happened a while ago. Dash, who was that man? Dash, what kind of power was that? They voiced out in confusion. Meanwhile, the rest of the Zalabins moved towards Junior Commander Folan to help him up. He was in a very bad state, with his left arm and shoulder down to the chest area were completely disintegrated. "See what you did to our junior commander," one of them shouted out while pointing a cannon-like weapon at the Red Jacket glowing with yellow light in the battle earlier. "Keep quiet, lackey. If it wasn't for you lots, we wouldn't be in this situation. Why is one of your men after our boss?" A thin, masculine voice could be heard from underneath the mask as the red jacket also pointed his weapon back at them. That person isn't one of us. As you can see, he attacked us as well, Region Leader Khan voiced out as he stood in the midst of this brawl. That doesn't change the fact that he was able to get here because of you lots, another red jacket voiced out as he also pointed his weapon at the Zalabans. At this point, both sides were about to confront each other as the atmosphere turned tense. Sahil crew outnumbered the Zalabans 6-3 since Junior Commander Folan was down. Still, even though Region Leader Khan didn't participate in the battle earlier, he was among the most powerful mixed bloods present, even stronger than Junior Commander Folan. Junior Commander Folan would have been able to do a better job at fighting since he was stronger than all the red jackets in the vicinity, but he could not defend himself from the blast earlier due to being frozen by Yarki, just like the others. Now, let's all be civilized here. We agree this is a mistake on our part, but as you can see, our side has the most casualties, Region Leader Khan voiced out as he gestured at the two Zalaban troops with scattered body parts and Junior Commander Folan on the ground. He didn't want this to turn into a battle between the two sides, mostly since the successful deal would be cancelled. And they were also outmanned. He might be stronger, but with the coordinated attacks of the six, they would lose. One of them was about to speak when Jabal, who had been behind all this time, interrupted. "We're leaving," he said while tapping the button by the side of his head. The others stared at him with a look of confusion. It seemed he had been communicating with someone just a while ago. "Mr. Khan, we shall contact you sometime soon to talk about the state of our partnership," Jabal said as he turned to the side and started walking forward while bringing out a piece of equipment. The others brought down their weapons and followed after him. He wasn't the main boss, but whenever the main boss was unavailable, he was always in charge, so they had no choice but to follow. Trunin, a greenish light shot out from the equipment and covered all 6 red jackets. In the next moment, the light disappeared along with all 7 of them, Jabal included. The Zalabans fed Junior Commander Folan a recovery pill. They carried him along with them. As they moved in the direction of the wall, they had appeared from when they first arrived here. Fortunately for them, it was still functioning, and they phased through, appearing back in the building they had used as a channel point to get here. However, the moment they arrived within the building, they could see the chaos that had been inflicted on this place. Karawaiwaichach. Bam! Crumbling sounds could be heard as they spotted parts of the building that had collapsed and parts that had cracks and giant holes all over. All this was because the gateway was still active when they were battling earlier, causing most of the attacks to phase through, which ended up colliding with the building. Meanwhile, Gustav was within the room he rented on his first day here. He sat on his bed with a look of contemplation. Everything that went down today kept replaying in his mind, and he couldn't help but sigh. He never underestimated Sahil after hearing so much about him and seeing reports. However, he never expected Sahil would be so cautious and smart that he would implement things like that. The whole situation played out well. The mission was practically failed at this point, and anyone would have fallen for the trap of planting the tracking device in the wrong person. If he didn't have God eyes, there would be no way to salvage the situation, since Sahil now knew that people were after him. His next step would be to hide even more cautiously than before or leave the city. Of course, he could decide not to leave, since he knew the tracking device was placed in the wrong person. He had no idea that Gustav could track him using his life sign. Gustav had never seen a more cautious fellow that literally questioned every little detail. If it were to be someone else, they might not bother with the change in color of the eye. Even after Gustav stated the power level of all his crew members, he still decided to run a check on their internal structures. The whole situation got messed up from the point where Jabal spotted him. Gustav hid well enough for no one to see him while he was saving Sahil's life sign, and it only took about 3 seconds for him to get it done. A very short time frame where no one would be able to spot him, but Sahil just happened to be able to sense energy from any source the moment it was emitted. Chapter 551. Gustav reckoned the tracking bug that entered into him was unable to be sensed due to the fact that it was inside him. If the tracking bug had emitted any form of energy before it infiltrated his system, he would have sensed it. At the moment, Gustav had transformed back to his original look and took off the black Zalabin outfit. It was placed on the bed, right beside him. He knew he couldn't play this character anymore. It would have already spread around the Zalabins by now that anyone looking like Junior Commander Dart was an imposter. While Gustav was contemplating his next plans, the communication device on the table rang. It was from the base in Ruhagi City. Gustav answered the call and instantly heard the excited voice of Officer Gooseman from the other end. "Congratulations, Officer Crimson. You have completed the mission, Gustav. We didn't expect you to get it done in such a short time. You're truly a prodigy." Officer Tron's voice was also heard from the other end. True, I never doubted you, though. But this is excellent performance." They didn't even give Gustav the chance to talk back before showering praises on him. "Now, the next step is extraction. We're currently planning that for you, or will you be able to find a way to leave yourself?" Officer Gooseman voiced out before keeping quiet. Gustav finally got the opportunity to speak. "The mission isn't complete yet," Gustav voiced out. "Huh? What do you mean by isn't complete? Stop trying to mess with us, kid. We can pinpoint the location of Sahil from here. He's currently on the move in Region 27. Officer Gooseman laughed as he spoke. "That isn't Sahil. That's Sahil look-alike and right-hand man, Jabal," Gustav stated. "Look-alike? Does that mean you put the tracker in the wrong person?" Officer Gooseman asked. "Yes, Sahil played us. Had his look-alike deal with everything at first, and I activated the tracker after managing to get close enough to make contact with him, only to find out later that it was only his look-alike," Gustav explained, omitting a lot of info. "Damn it, he had a look-alike? We never received reports that he had a look-alike." Even Officer Gooseman was surprised. "Every time we try to catch him, we end up finding out new information, he never runs out of tricks." Officer Lewis' voice was also heard from the other side. Gustav had to readmit that Sahil was extremely good to not only have slipped away from the MBO hands several times, but also have them wondering what other tricks he had up his sleeves. As expected of a newbie, "I knew Head messed this up." Officer Millie, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "It's not his fault, Millie. Who's to say you wouldn't get fooled in such a situation as well?" Officer Tron disagreed. "Of course I wouldn't." "Humph. You all give him too much credit for nothing. This is his first field mission, and just like many others before him, he failed," she added. "Gustav, we'll have to extract you. This mission is a failed one already since there is no spare tracking device in your possession." Officer Gooseman had to agree with Officer Millie and see this as a failed mission. "Who said it was a failed mission?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of repression. What do you mean?" Officer Gooseman asked. "Just because I put the tracker in the wrong person doesn't make it a failed mission," Gustav responded. "That tracker is one of a kind because its camouflage ability is one of the best in the world. It is nearly impossible for it to be spotted, which is why it was given to us for this mission due to the fact that Sahil is no ordinary criminal. We don't even have a spare here, so this mission is a failed one," Officer Gooseman explained. "Just give it up, kid. You already did a good job of getting close to him. No cadet would be able to pull that off this fast." "If it makes you happy, I also failed my first mission, and unlike you, I was already a full-fledged officer who had spent 4 years in training," Officer Tron narrated, trying to encourage Gustav. "I only answered the call for a few reasons." Gustav started speaking. "First is because of the look-alike who got implanted. Second is to let you know that I still a tracker on real Sahil. and I will be going after him myself before he escapes from the city," Gustav voiced out strongly. "Wait, what? You managed to put a tracker on the real Sahil? How? You're going after him yourself?" "That is not allowed," Officer Gooseman and Millie voiced out together. "Yes, I have a tracker on the real Sahil, but I am the only one that can pin his location," Gustav added. "How? And what do you mean you're going after him? We should get you extracted as soon as possible, so you can point us to his location when he is out," Officer Millie voiced out in quick successions with a tone of disbelief. "The means is not important. What's important is I can find him. However, I don't know how far the connection between I and the tracker can last, which is why I have to go after him as soon as possible. If I wait till he gets out of the city, I might not be able to keep tracking him. So I have to seize the opportunity while he's still in the city to catch him," Gustav explained. "Have you gone insane? He's succeeded in fooling you already. What makes you think you'll be able to catch him?" "Officer Gooseman, he shouldn't be allowed to do this. We should extract him," Officer Millie voiced out. "Now, this is quite the situation. The mission was only for you to place a tracker on him. This is—" Before Officer Gooseman could complete his sentence, the communication was cut. "I didn't answer the call to request. I already made my decision," Gustav muttered as he put the communication device away. Chapter 552. I didn't answer the call to make a request. "I already made my decision," Gustav muttered as he put the communication device away. On the other side, they thought there was a communication issue and tried getting through to Gustav again, but he didn't bother accepting their call. Keeping the communication device away that kept beeping nonstop, Gustav finally decided to focus on his plans to catch Sahil. Sahil happened to be a Peak Falcon ranked mixed blood. Meanwhile, Gustav was still at Peak Marshal rank. Using the analysis from the battle before, he knew Marshal rank could fall under the power of his Yarki, but he just had to release more quantity to gain control for more powerful mixed bloods. This was why, if he wanted to take control of a mixed blood that was way stronger than him using Yarki, he would have already run out of energy before it was able to take control. At the moment, he only had around 20% of his Yarki energy left due to using it on the Zalabans and Sahil troops earlier. This meant activating Yarki again for the second time would lead to running out of energy, and he would have to spend many days trying to recharge it if it completely ran out of energy. He wouldn't have spent so much energy if he restricted its spread earlier, which meant he could still use it twice a day if he was dealing with someone on Sahil's strength level. However, Gustav didn't want to underestimate Sahil due to this, as he recalled Lucius and his other subordinate, who he fought on his first day here, were able to use their bloodlines while being subjected to his Yarki. He didn't know what Sahil had hidden under his sleeves, and how he would react to not controlling his body. One thing Gustav was sure of at the moment was the fact that Sahil definitely would have figured out now that the enemy had the power to subject their bodies to control, which meant he had to act as quickly as possible. Although Sahil wouldn't be in the same location with his look-alike right now to avoid getting caught, he would still be cautious, knowing that there were unknown enemies in the city out to get him, and they could disguise themselves. "I'll have to time my usage of Yarki properly if it's ever needed. I need to take him by surprise, catch him before he notices my presence," Gustav said as he brought out the invisibility buttons. He still had about 8 of them left since he had already made use of 2. Gustav transformed into the same face he had been disguising as from day one and brought out a mask from his storage device. The mask was shaped to look like a demon face with 2 long horns at the top. Its deep red color made it look even more menacing. Placing the mask beside him, Gustav changed his outfit to that of a black jacket and pants before sitting on the bed. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes glowed up in the next instant, turning scarlet and green with a hint of gold surrounding his irises. His eyes looked extremely mesmerizing at this point. It was no surprise Head have to hide when using God eyes in that situation due to the way it looked attractive. Using it out in the open would definitely attract attention. Initiating life signs tracking. Gustav closed his eyes as his vision was being pulled to another location. Pa. A crisp slap reverberated across the park-like surrounding within the MBO camp. You did this to me. The voice of a young girl laced with a tone of disbelief could be heard. I didn't mean to. The voice of a boy laced with a tone of regret responded. Behind a tall tree, it could be seen that Angie and Endrik stood opposite each other. Angie had a look of disbelief and disappointment on her face as she stared at Endrik, who was looking down with an expression of regret. I stood up for you more than once. I begged Gustav on your behalf that you would change. And this is what you did to me in return? I am losing my bloodline every day because of you. Angie's fist was tightened up as she vibrated with anger while speaking. Her eyes were already teary, and she was close to shedding a tear, but she held it in. Every day for the last 7 months, I have worked hard to increase my strength. Every time, I push myself to the limit. And now you're saying all my efforts will be wasted? Angie's chest heaved up and down as a wave of mental pain washed over her. I did. I really didn't mean it. I had no idea this would happen. It has been 3 months since I injected the toxin into you. I wasn't informed of its effects, and assumed you were okay since you didn't show any symptoms. I am not that person anymore, I'm sorry. Endrik tried explaining himself. You better hope that the doctor finds a cure for this, or I will finish what Gustav couldn't. Angie's voice was laced with so much hate at this point that Endrik couldn't recognize the sweet and innocent-looking girl anymore. It would seem Angie was unable to deal with the thought of losing her bloodline. She stormed off a moment after saying that, leaving Endrik standing in the same spot with a look of reflection. I won't resist if that is what you wish for when the time comes. I must have been stupid to think I could just get away with my deeds, simply because I am turning a new leaf. Back in the city, Gustav was currently on the move. It was close to evening, and he had only started moving a few minutes ago. Earlier, he figured out the location of Sahi. Still, he had to keep life signs tracking active for a long period due to what he noticed Sahil doing. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.